It's time for Twit This Week in Tech. With a big week at the Supreme Court, we're really glad Mike Masnick from Tech Dirt is here. Owen Thomas joins us from the San Francisco Examiner. And from MacBreak Weekly, Alex Lindsay is in the house. We'll talk about Section 230, the oral arguments, why the NSA probably should be governed a little bit more by the Supreme Court, a potential Apple Watch ban. They got the hacker who hacked all those Twitter accounts, and then an iPhone that sold for $63,000. All that and more coming up next on Twit.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twit. This Week in Tech, episode 916, recorded Sunday, February 26th, 2023. Fetch happens. This Week in Tech is brought to you by Noom. Stay focused on what's important to you with Noom Weight's psychology-based approach. And check out Noom's first ever book, The Noom Mindset, a deep dive into the psychology of behavior change. Available to buy now wherever books are sold. And of course, sign up for your trial at Noom.com/twit. And by Worldwide Technology. With an innovative culture, thousands of IT engineers, application developers, unmatched labs, and integration centers for testing and deploying technology at scale. WWT helps customers bridge the gap between strategy and execution. To learn more about WWT, visit wwt.com/twit. And by Stamps.com. Set your business up for success. When you start today, sign up with the promo code TWIT for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, free postage, and a free digital scale. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, and enter the code TWIT. And by ACI Learning. If you love IT Pro, you'll love ACI Learning. ACI Learning offers fully customizable training for your team in formats for all kinds of learners across audit, cybersecurity, and IT. From entry-level training to putting people on the moon, ACI Learning has you covered. Visit go.acilearning.com/twit to learn more. It's time for Twit This Week in Tech, the show where we cover the week's tech news. I have assembled, actually Jason Howell has assembled the best panel of journalists money could buy. Well, since we don't pay them, it's... Anyway, Mike Masnick is here, techdirt.com. Now, that's pretty good. Hey, Mike.
Hello.
Good to see you. We had your colleague Kathy on Twig to talk about the Supreme Court, but you had some great takes, too. I want to get your thoughts about Section 230, Gonzalez versus Google. We also have a wonderful friend, Owen Thomas, columnist for the Examiner now. He's the Herb Cain of tech in San Francisco.
Oh, stop. Go on, you.
Also, his personal blog. I hate to publish it, to promote it, because you haven't published anything there in 7 years, but someday he will. Ditherati.com.
I keep threatening to.
You're busy now. You're writing for a real place, so I understand.
You know, would Herb Cain have a daily blog? Probably, actually.
Actually, I wonder what Herb would do. That's a really interesting question. Yeah. He was the legendary San Francisco Chronicle columnist. He was the guy. This is back when really newspapers were just about display ads. They were the thing in between the display ads, and he was the guy. His column was right next to the Macy's ad every single day. And the whole point was to get you to look at the Macy's ad, I think. Also with us, Alex Lindsay, regular on MacBreak Weekly. We like to bring in people from other shows from time to time. 090.media is his business. His day job, after hours, it's officehours.global. Hi, Alex.
Hi. It's good to be here.
It's nice to see you on a Sunday.
I know. It's usually hard, but it's great to be here.
Let me start with the bad news from the Supreme Court. They decided not to take the case. Wikimedia, the parent company of Wikipedia, had sued the NSA over their upstream surveillance. As you probably know, I mean, this was a lawsuit from 2015. Thanks to Edward Snowden and other revelations, we've realized that the NSA wasn't getting into your Google and Facebook and Twitter account. They were just doing it upstream as it came out of those servers into the real world. And they were doing it basically for everyone. It was the suspicionless, that's the word they use, collection and searching of internet traffic on data transmission lines flowing into and out of the United States. They said, well, mostly it was just foreign targets, except for anybody the foreign target was talking to in the U.S. You were there too. But the justices said, no, it's protected because release of some information would damage U.S. national security. That seems sensible, actually, Mike.
I'm going to challenge that.
Okay.
So it's actually, there are a bunch of issues with the program and the setup, and it goes beyond kind of what you just described a little bit, right? So they were tapping all communications basically as they left or came into the United States, which you said, and they were doing that directly through the backbone providers, so AT&T, Verizon, whoever else. The issue was not just foreign nationals communicating with Americans. It was that they were basically scanning through everything, and it was to, from, and then it also included the much more scary about communication. So if you mentioned someone in an email that was on a target list, or if you mentioned a phone number or an email address or possibly some other keyword that was on a list, then it would get collected. And again, there's no warrant here. So you could be, as an American, having your communications collected. And then once it was collected, it would go into a larger database that then the FBI could search through without a warrant. And so there was all sorts of information that is not the type of thing that would normally be collected and certainly would raise Fourth Amendment issues in general. And yet, because of the sort of funky way in which it was done and set up, in that it was collected outside the U.S. Through the backbone and then sort of backed into this database that the FBI could search, it sort of had this, this one weird trick to get around the Fourth Amendment. And that's what the lawsuit was really trying to challenge. And the court basically said, for national security reasons, we're not even going to look into that. And that seems pretty questionable, because if you can just get around the entire Fourth Amendment by saying national security interests and maybe some other sort of fancy footwork to say, well, this is happening outside the U.S., not inside the U.S., so we're all good. The fact that it is collecting up, tons and tons of, American information without a warrant, and then allowing it to be searched by the FBI does seem to me like a pretty big deal.
They said this is permitted by the FISA Act, our good friend, the FISA Act.
Yeah. So that's the other thing, is that read the FISA Act and tell me where that's permitted.
Yeah.
Because it's an interesting interpretation of the FISA Act that the NSA has said allows them to do that, but that's never really been reviewed by a court. And that was the point of this entire case by Wikipedia, represented by the ACLU, was the idea that, let's see that. Let's see the language. How do you justify from the language of the FISA Amendments Act that this would be allowed? And the courts basically said, we're not even going to review that because the government is saying national security secrets.
It was dismissed by the Fourth Circuit a couple of years ago, appealed to the Supreme Court, who declined to give cert. The ACLU lawyers argued that they should listen to the case, saying, quote, although this mass surveillance of Americans' private communications raises grave constitutional questions, its lawfulness has yet to be considered by any ordinary court, civil or criminal, in more than 20 years of operation. Yeah, it feels like that's exactly what the Supreme Court should be ruling on. Is this constitutional?
Yeah.
Is there no mechanism for them to do that kind of secretly? I mean, as Congress does?
Not. I think that's the problem, is the Supreme Court doesn't really have a mechanism to do that, to do it, to manage top secret,
they're not set up for that.
Processes.
Yeah.
And so, that's all a matter of public record, I believe. And so that's probably part of the pushback. And, in other shows, I'm very opinionated about the fact that, phones and everything else should be protected. Our phone, we shouldn't be just letting if we have it locked off, we don't want to hand it off. It's something that's very personal to us. I will say that, I work all over the world, and we're pretty, things are pretty safe here. And, we just want to remember that, like, as we start to unravel get into things, as we start to want to unravel these, a lot of the reason they're safe is because of a lot of these information gathering. When you understand tactically how they work, they're very, very, very powerful in a way that, we don't have. I work in countries where everybody has a fence around their house and broken glass and barbed wire across the top. And that's the other side. I don't want to be a fearmonger, but there's a lot of people gunning for us. We just want to make sure that we're clear that asymmetrical threats are a real thing, and most of them get buried pretty quickly because of these information gathering tools. And so,
does it come down, Alex, to whether you trust the NSA with that data? They call it Bumble Hive. They built a data center famously in Utah that can hold exabytes of data, and the thinking is that they're just storing all traffic. In this Bumble Hive.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I think that there's obviously some major issues that could occur. I mean, and I think that trust is a big piece of it. And I think that I don't know if they've always been trustworthy in that area.
You gotta love the fact that the Bumble Hive has a web page. Here it is: Domestic Surveillance Directorate, defending our nation, securing the citizens. And right in front of Bumble Hive, there's a big sign. Kind of sign you'd see in front of a church. Welcome to the Utah Data Center. And then they have those little temporary letters they put up with your slogan of the week. It says, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. Holy mackerel.
I don't think I'd put that there. Yeah.
I don't know if that's the exact motto the NSA would like to pursue, but that tells you something.
I feel like Eric Schmidt said something to that effect. And, the irony there is that Eric Schmidt, with his
pants,
extramarital relationships, and his
we
and
closed
his
the door on the bathroom. I got nothing to hide, but it's none of your business.
Yeah, I do think that we have to be very careful about this, but we also have to be very careful of, I think that probably the Supreme Court looked at it and said, well, it is outside the country. And the NSA, of course, was built a long time ago, and it is specifically designed to do what it's doing. Like, it is not like we built something that kind of decided to move into this. Echelon was built to manage traffic
for a long time. But for a long time, they denied the existence of Echelon. We only know about that. But FISA, GCHQ kind of admitted it. Whoops.
Yeah, so FISA, the FISA thing is new. It's 20 years old. Echelon is a lot older than that.
This was that keyword grabbing thing Mike was talking about, where it just looks at all traffic say the word bomb 4 times and Beetlejuice appears.
Well, it's more of, so when the big thing about gathering all that data into the past is what it allows you to do is go forward and backward. So basically what happens is someone does something bad, and I can just go backwards in time and look at who they were talking to in the past. So, like, let's say someone does a terrorist act, I can go back to before they were a terrorist and see who they were talking to.
Oh, I see the value of it. I understand.
I don't need to see the information, but the thing is that is devastating, for a terrorist organization, for us to be able to find you before someone told you to start, having tradecraft, before you were trained in tradecraft. You are still, we know who you were around, and then you go forward, and what happens is you go backward. You find those people, and you go forward, and you find everyone that they're connected to. And so it makes every terrorist act very, very difficult, very hard to avoid what happens next, And so so I think that yes, it is a fissionable material. Like, it is something that is pretty dangerous in that area. And it is also why people like me, like when I travel all over the world, if I see someone that is remotely, like, I have to admit, if they are remotely interesting, like they say things that are a little like on the edge of that, I don't talk to them anymore. like I'm just like, I don't want to be.
How about this also from the NSA's very interesting website? Our ultimate target, 256-bit AES. They have a supercomputer. And this is, by the way, this is old data. They built a supercomputer in like 2004, a Cray. I'm sure they have much better technology, but they want to crack AES. So, Mike, that is the defense, right? Hey, we need to do this. You got to trust the NSA. We got to protect you.
Yeah, but there are things like the Constitution and the Fourth Amendment and the laws that Congress has written that authorize what the NSA can and cannot do within the limits of the Fourth Amendment. And the issue here was not so much whether or not they're protecting us but whether or not this is legal and whether or not this is constitutional. And that's something that the courts are supposed to decide.
I think it's reasonable. That's what the Supreme Court does, right? Here's more fun quotes from Oak Ridge. Our classified NSA Oak Ridge facility made a stunning breakthrough that's leading us on a path toward building the first exaflop machine by 2018. Again, this is a little dated. Since the capability to break the AES 256-bit encryption key within an actionable time period may still be decades away, our Utah facility is sized to store all encrypted and thereby suspicious data for safekeeping. So if you're sending if you're using Signal, it's being stored there.
So all encrypted data is suspicious. That's an interesting formulation.
It's the same thing as if you got nothing. If you're not, you got nothing to hide. You got nothing to fear.
I would flip that around on the NSA and the intelligence community broadly. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. If there is,
why are they hiding?
Alex, where I would push back on what you're saying is like. Mm-hmm. We have to take their word for all these threats that they right. claim their systems are stopping. We don't have evidence because it is secret. Now, obviously, you can't like bust everything wide open and share your sources and methods because then you wouldn't be able to stop anything anywhere, anytime. But I think that some level of accountability and judicial review, legislative review, accountability through Congress and the courts is needed here simply for public trust.
And I think that what you're looking at here is really a essentially the intelligence version of a double Dutch sandwich. Like basically they have done what corporations do with taxes, where they said, well, it's outside the country, which is the way that the NSA has worked for a long time. Congress can write new laws if they want to in this area. I think that it would be very difficult for the Supreme Court to dig into this in the way that they'd like to.
There's the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, the PCLOB, that was tasked with actually looking at this particular program. And they did, and they found problems with the program. And so again, then what? Once you have this board that's found problems with the program, then you would hope that the courts could review it as well. And you would hope that Congress would review it. Now, this particular program, it's the 702 program or whatever is set to sunset at the end of this year. And so that's going to be the next big debate because it has a 6-year time period. And every time that it is about to sunset, last time in 2017, towards the end of the year, you're going to see all sorts of scare stories in the media about how if we let this program go away, people are going to die, there's going to be terrorist attacks and all sorts of stuff. And yet there has, for whatever you're saying about how this system protects us, there has yet to be any evidence given by the government, by the NSA, of how this particular program has actually stopped any kind of terrorist activity. They can, you can make all these claims all you want, but they've yet to present any evidence of that. And so I'm sure at the end of this year, we're going to see the same thing, where all these stories and all these people saying, oh, if we don't renew this program, people are going to die. And without the evidence to support that, it gets right back to what Owen was saying. What are they hiding? If you actually have evidence of that, show it to us. Show us how this program has actually protected us before we get Congress to renew it. And so, it would be nice if Congress, and from my perspective, I think Congress shouldn't renew it, or if they do renew it,
they will. They will.
Of course they will. Of course they will. But it should be greatly restricted from what it is now. And again, like the law, if you read the law right now, it is not clear that it enables this. This is an interpretation by the NSA of how to interpret this law. Like, make it explicit. If you want the NSA to do this, put that in the law so that people know. Because this is the whole thing. Like, nobody knew about this program, despite the law being public, until Edward Snowden released all these documents that revealed how they were interpreting the law. And that alone is a problem. If you want to say that this is a good program and an important program, fine, but be public about it.
Isn't the theory, though, that there's the congressional oversight and whatever it is, the Gang of Eight who are cleared to see this? It's their job as our representatives to look at this, and it protects both the security of the NSA and our privacy. Isn't that the theory?
Yeah, but part of the reality is also that the intelligence community has lied to the overseers, right?
Oh.
This is what Senator Wyden has revealed a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Well, he'll ask questions, and as soon as you see Senator Wyden asking questions of the intelligence community, you know they're lying about something, because that's how it works. Right. He'll basically he's trying to trap them in the lie without violating security clearance that he has. And so, over and over again, he asked them, please explain how this is happening, or what is happening here, or what are the, to what extent are you doing this? And what comes out is that they're lying. They are, maybe, they wouldn't say lying, but they are using words in ways that nobody else defines those words in order to justify what it is that they're doing. And again, that gets to the problem. If you want to do this, be public about it, explain exactly what you're doing, explain how it's justified or how it's, authorized by the law. And then let's have a debate about it. Then let's have a conversation about it. But that's not what we have.
Maybe write to the members of the Gang of Eight, Mike Turner, Jim Himes, Mark Warner, Marco Rubio, Kevin McCarthy, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and Mitch McConnell, and say, ask some tough questions. We, the people, don't want this blank check to continue. When is the renewal up this year?
The end of this year.
Okay.
I forget if it's December 31st or whatever, but it's towards the end of this year.
Actually, interestingly, the UK is looking at something called the Online Safety Bill, which would basically, they don't admit it, but would ban end-to-end encryption. It would at least have to provide a backdoor. And the folks at Signal said this week that they'd walk away from the UK if that bill undermined end-to-end encryption. Governments, especially the Five Eyes all over the world, are trying to break down this door to encryption. By the way, I owe an apology to the NSA. As wonderful as this site is, it is not their site. It's nsa.gov1.info. I should have known better looking at the URL. It is a parody site. But in a way, the parody strikes home. So I apologize. That is not the official NSA slogan.
And I think that
nor is it out front of the Utah Center. Darn it!
It did seem strange.
It seemed a little odd. I should have really
on the nose.
Used my head. Yeah.
I think that a lot of times people talk about security with encryption. When it comes to encryption, they talk about the fact that right now they have an HD signal that is all it's 1920 by 1080 of all the information of people around them, and there's one pixel missing.
They don't like those dark pixels.
And they're like, I don't know what's going on in that dark pixel, and I want to have that opened up. And I do think that we do have to be careful of as far as gathering it. As I said, I think that if the NSA is doing it overseas, I think it's gonna be very hard to stop. I don't know whether I agree with it or not, but I think it's gonna be very hard to ever get anyone to rule on that, because usually they bring up the cases that we can't see. But when it comes to starting to break down our encryption, I think that is a big deal. Like what the UK is trying to do of we want to get rid of the encryption. It's one thing to collect it, where by the time they get into it, it probably will be not doing that anymore, whatever it was. But I think that taking apart the last little bit of us being able to keep our stuff encrypted if we choose to, I think is a big deal.
The WhatsApp folks say they would refuse to lower security for any government. But unfortunately, I mean, as we've seen before, if a government requires it, you really don't have the choice. You either leave the country or comply, right? You can't
you should leave the country.
Yeah, you should leave. But I don't know. That's pretty draconian, too. And, of course, the online safety bill is, as usual, raised the paper tiger of protecting the children. But I think the people who want this are really much more about, let's see what's going on everywhere.
There are a lot of problems with the online safety bill. It touches on a whole bunch of different things, and of course, it sort of keeps changing. So it's a little, it's
hard
a bit
to know
of a
what they're
moving
going to
target.
do. Yeah.
And so and so because of that, you'll have people say that it doesn't actually attack encryption. It sort of does so in an underhanded manner, and that's the way most of the online safety bill actually works. Is this kind of like vague language which is effectively like, just don't do anything wrong and we won't bother you. And if you do something that we consider wrong, then the government will come and bring the hammer down.
And the challenge is always that the the intelligence agencies are highly technical, highly focused, and know exactly what they want. And they're talking to legislators around the world that have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And
or in couching in terms, it's hard to say no. If you're saying, look, we just want to catch pedophiles, it's hard as an elected official to say, well, no, I'm not in favor of that. So that's why they use that, right? Consider the children. This is what the Home Office, the British Home Office, says. It's important that technology companies make every effort to ensure their platforms do not become a breeding ground for pedophiles. The online, get this, talk about mealy mouth. The online safety bill does not, I should do this in a British accent. The online safety bill does not represent a ban on end-to-end encryption, Governor, but makes it clear that technological changes should not be implemented in a way that diminishes public safety, especially the safety of children online. And, of course, now then they draw the line. Well, encryption does that. It diminishes the safety of children. But they say it's not a choice between privacy or child safety. We can and we must have both. How? I don't know.
Yeah, without the encryption, it's hard.
It's hard.
Again, we get back to that. I believe that as long as we have encryption and people who know what they're, if you're doing something, again, most of the communication that I do when it's not in messages is in Signal, knowing that it will be, probably okay. And I'm talking about like,
by the way, you're not alone.
For presentations.
Samuel Bankman-Fried loves Signal. A lot of people love Signal. Apparently, members of the Congress love Signal. Matt Gaetz loves Signal. A lot of people love Signal.
Yeah.
The problem is, and the quote of they've got a high-def screen, and this is true. Technology has given law enforcement this incredible view into all of our lives, and they just don't like these little dark parts. And I mentioned this to you before. It comes from Phil Zimmerman, the guy who created PGP. And from the very beginning, people said to Phil, well, you're going to allow people to encrypt stuff. Bad guys are going to use it. And his answer always was collateral damage. If we got to have privacy.
Politicians, that's a hard one because the next big terrorist, like the security.
I know they don't want to get
intelligence agencies say, here's the deal.
I know.
Here's a head that's going to sit on your desk if anything goes. Like literally, they tell them this all the time that
of course
if something goes bad, if 1,000 people die because of this, we're going to blame you.
It's your fault.
We're going to get up and we're going to get up from it and we're going to blame you.
How do we balance that, Mike? Do you have a suggestion?
That's really hard for a politician.
I understand. We want safety.
Yeah, but I think you guys made the point already, which is that it's not a question of balancing, right? Encryption is part of protecting people and making them safe. The idea that law enforcement is having all sorts of difficulty because of encryption still is not proven. They just keep saying that, and yet, as you've said, they have more access to more information than ever before. The ability to go forward and back in time, as we were discussing earlier, the ability to get all sorts of access to information that was impossible before, the ability to solve all sorts of crimes that were impossible before is there now. They have more power now than ever before and more visibility into all of this stuff than ever before. If there are a few small areas, even in the cases where people are using encryption, the reality is that almost everybody uses encryption, trips up somehow, right? There's all sorts of things. If you're really doing bad, there are ways for law enforcement to get at the information they need to take you down. Almost always that's the case. The idea that we need to break encryption for everybody else where it is keeping them safe and where it is protecting them from malicious actors and hackers and foreign governments that are trying to do bad things, the value that you get from the encryption is so much higher than whatever little, like, as yet unproven problems there are for law enforcement, that I don't think that the conversation should be about balance, because, we already have what we need. We have the tools to protect ourselves, and law enforcement has more tools than ever before to stop bad actors.
It's interesting that Apple, who has been selling privacy for some time and now is sort of starting to live up to its promise. They've offered this advanced data protection, which encrypts everything on iCloud, and as I understand it, fully encrypts it. There's no backdoor. They decided to back down on their CSAM scanning. Again, something that NCMEC and National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and advocates of that ilk wanted, and Apple was going to do until they heard the hue and cry. Is that a bellwether? Is the fact that Apple is going to support good encryption a bellwether?
Apple is slowly tightening a privacy noose. if they do too much of it too quickly, people will not let them do it. And every update is just a little tighter than it was before. And every update, ATT and all the other things they're doing, all of those things are just they're just tightening screws very slowly to keep on trying to perfect us not being able, not being tracked in any way, shape, or form, which is really upsetting a lot.
But they're going to come, aren't they going to come up against governments saying, well, you can't do
eventually.
That. Yeah.
Well, but if you did it all at one time, it would immediately, the thing is if you boil that frog very slowly, and you slowly tie it in and you build it so that so many things that Apple's doing is they're kind of knocking all the pegs off behind them so that it's very hard to unwrap back out. So if someone said, well, we have to get access, Apple's a couple versions away from going, well, we
can't help you.
We can't, there's no way to build that back into the older versions. And, so the thing is that
I know that Apple would like that.
They have to pull it back.
I know that Apple would like to be able to say, sorry, send us all the subpoenas you want. We don't have that information. But at some point, China, Russia, maybe the U.S., England, they're going to say, but we need that information.
Russia doesn't really matter anymore, but for Russia. Apple,
yeah.
They don't need
China's another matter, though.
China's a big part, but you can, most companies are diversifying from China out of the fear that they're going to create trouble in Taiwan. And so, they can't do it right now, but they, I think everybody's diversifying right now from China because they see it as the next problem child. So,
Mike, do you think that maybe the tech industry is starting to come down on the right side on this, or?
Well, it's still a challenge. I think everybody's sort of trying to explore, and they are afraid of governments cracking down. I think Apple, when they tried to do the CSAM scanning, that was definitely a step in the wrong direction. And luckily there was a very loud outcry and they realized to go in the other direction. And now, even take a much bigger step in the other direction, which was encrypting the cloud backup data. And so, I think Apple has definitely made some moves in the right direction. I think Google's made some moves in the right direction on encryption as well. But it is an ongoing challenge. And as Alex said, if they go too fast, then that leads to more things like what Australia has done, effectively trying to outlaw encryption, what the UK is trying to do to outlaw encryption. And there are some bills that are, popping up here and there in the US and a little bit in the EU too, where they're sort of approaching this kind of thing, where they're trying to get them to effectively outlaw or backdoor encryption, which is really the same thing. And, I think the companies, for the most part, do seem to want to do the right thing. But it is definitely walking the line and balancing how hard the different governments are going to come down on them.
There is a lesson, though, from that Apple CSAM thing. They listened when enough of us stood up and said, no, this is a bad idea. When the EFF and others, petitioned, when everybody stood up and said this is a bad idea, they did, and they finally have backed down entirely, and they're not going to do it. So,
and I think that the CSAM, I think what Apple was trying to do is we're going to keep turning up that they saw the CSAM. What they were doing there was that we're going to keep on tightening this up, and people are going to use they're going to use
they had a strategy
issue. They're going to use this issue, so they thought that they could build a solution that would protect them.
Right.
So as they keep on turning it, you can't use that against them. And so I think that was their mentality when they did it. It just didn't ring very well.
Yeah. And I guess my message is, it works. So if people like Mike keep rattling the cage and say no, there is no safe way to backdoor encryption. Encryption protects all of us. That's good. We got to all stand up and be counted on that.
I want to use one example is, so, we had this thing with TSA, TSA, you have those little TSA locks, which are worthless now. Why are they worthless? Why are the TSA worthless? So the TSA locks, the keys in the TSA lock are one dimensional. They're just outlines. They don't have any extra code to.
And there's only one.
No. There's like 8 or 9.
Oh, there's more than
8
one.
or 9 of them.
Okay.
But the thing is so to have a TSA lock. So what we did is we said, okay, we trust TSA. We're gonna put a lock in so that only TSA can get into our bags.
Right.
The problem is some doofus got interviewed by the Washington Post or whatever, and they let him they said, can we take a picture of the keys? And he's like, sure. They took a picture of the keys. Now it's completely like those locks became, because you can't go back and change them. You've sold millions and millions and millions of these locks, and so at this point, because of that one article, and because someone just, we left the back door open to TSA, and what they did with it was let someone take a picture of it, which now invalidated all those locks. You might as well just use zip ties at this point, which is what we do. We use zip ties because
interesting.
The locks are worthless.
Yeah, and they're going to cut the zip tie, but you don't care about that.
Well, they'll put the zip tie back. The secret to zip ties is that with a lock, you don't know whether they got into your case. If you put an orange zip tie, TSA only owns clear zip ties, so they'll put it back. You can look at all your bags. I do production, so
aren't they supposed to put a little piece of paper in that says "Thank you, citizen"?
But it helps us to know. I literally, because what happens is the number one way we break equipment.
That one.
Well, the number one way we break equipment is TSA opens our bag and then packs it badly.
Right.
And so what we do is we can just look at all of them coming off. We'll have 20 bags coming off, and we'll see the 2 that they went through. Pull them open, look at them, see if they broke anything, and then that just allows us to error correct if we now don't have a monitor. That kind of thing.
Another tip: don't put ground coffee in your bags because apparently drug smugglers use that to hide the smell of the drugs. And Lisa likes to pack her coffee on our trips. And the last time we went somewhere, she said, "Can you carry my coffee in your bag?" It took me a while to get through TSA that day. And I'm not sure I'd want to drink the coffee after they dug through it. But anyway, just a little tip. Hey, we have a great panel here. This was just one story, the NSA story, but there is another big Supreme Court story. We're going to get to that. Mike Masnick is here from Techter. It's always great to have you. That's Mike's on the left. On the right, we've got Alex Lindsay from officehours.global and 090 Media. Somebody said, finally, some balance on this show. Alex, you I guess pass for what is balance on this show.
I guess I don't know what that means because no one's ever claimed that I was balanced. So
the imbalance, Michael, Alex Lindsay, and also, of course, my good friend Owen Thomas, who is now a columnist at the San Francisco Examiner. I'm going to keep saying the Herb Cain of Silicon Valley until somebody stops me. You're it. You're the guy.
I'll keep taking it.
You're the guy. Hey, I want to take a break for one of our sponsors and talk about something I've been using now for more than a year. Lisa and I both have. It's called Noom. I probably, like you, saw a lot of ads a couple of years ago for Noom, this new weight management program. And I saw the ads and I thought, that's interesting. Finally, one day, I got tired of the yo-yo dieting I'd been doing. I said, let me try it. And Lisa, my wife, to her credit, said, I'll do it with you. She's slender. She had a few pounds, I guess, to lose. I didn't seem that way to me, but she felt that way. So we both do it. Now, Lisa is the poster child for Noom. She lost 10 pounds and has kept it off for more than a year. I lost about 16 pounds. It's been up and down a little bit, but every time I lose some more, I just do more of those lessons in Noom. It really, really works. When you decide to lose weight, it's more than just the number on the scale. There are other reasons, more health, right? Or because you want to look better. And there's lots of reasons that's hard to do. With Noom, you learn about what it is that's causing you to eat. Do you eat because you're bored? Do you eat because you can't pass up food when it's free? I can't pass up food, period. If there's a cupcake in front of me, I will resist, but eventually I'm going to eat that. So that's what Noom really helps you with. It helps you break the cycle, understand what you're doing, and break those habits. Change them for good. Noom Weight uses psychology to help you understand what's going on in your brain so you can learn to make healthier choices every day. Losing weight starts with your brain, not with your mouth, not with your fork. It starts with your brain. The program helps you understand the science behind your eating choices, why you're craving. I am a stuffer. I will go home unconsciously. I will eat 1,000 calories before I even notice it. And as soon as I learned that, I was able to control it, which is amazing. I'm very much aware of it when I was completely unconscious before. Noom Weight really works. More than 4.6 million people now have lost weight. On average, 15 pounds in 16 weeks. That's exactly what I did, by the way. We have friends who've lost much more. Brianna Wu lost 100 pounds on Noom and has kept it off and looks great. We have one of our chatters, one of our regulars in both Discord and IRC, went on that Alaska cruise with us. And I said, I knew he was going to be on it. I texted him. I said, where are you? I don't see you. He said, he texted me back. I'm standing right next to you. I didn't recognize him. Well, he shaved his beard too. So it wasn't completely the weight, but he'd lost 60 pounds in Noom. And yes, he was a new man. He really was. Noom's flexible program focuses on progress, not perfection. You don't have to give up carbs or create some other weird restrictive diet. I don't know about you, but I found when I have something restricted, that's the one I want, right? Can't eat any more pasta. I need pasta. And eventually it breaks you down. Noom doesn't do that. But I got to say, everyone's journey is different. You get personalized lessons to your goals. That's why when you sign up for Noom, they're going to ask you a lot of questions. I know it takes some time, but that's really to kind of prepare those lessons to fit exactly what your needs. They use things like cognitive behavioral therapy, which really, really works. If you have cravings or food FOMO, I have big food FOMO. Noom Weight can help you lose weight while still enjoying your favorite foods. And you could choose the level of support. You could do 5-minute daily check-ins. You could have personal coaching. You have groups. And, of course, you have those lessons. You can spend as much or a little time on those as you want. I think the lessons are fantastic. Noom has published more than 30 peer-reviewed scientific articles to inform users, practitioners, scientists, and the public about their methods and effectiveness. Peer-reviewed scientific articles. These really, there is a real basis for Noom. It's not a gimmick. It's not a fad diet. It's not a diet at all. It's an education program that helps you stay focused on what's important to you. Noom Weight's psychology-based approach. It worked for me. It worked for Lisa. It worked for Brianna. It worked for so many people I know. Sign up for your trial today at noom.com/twit. Honest, it really, really works. NOOM.com/twit. And, of course, sign up for your trial. You can see if it works for you. There's also a book. They just published their first ever book, The Noom Mindset. The Noom Mindset, a deep dive into the psychology of behavior change. If nothing else, get the book and read it because I think it'll give you a better idea of what Noom's all about. Available to buy now wherever books are sold. Noom, NOOM.com/twit. We thank them so much for their support of This Week in Tech. So that wasn't the only thing the Supreme Court did this week. There were two other cases that some say, I don't know, is it hyperbole, Mike Masnick, to say the fate of the internet rests in the hands of these 9 justices?
Well, potentially, it may depend on what they have to say in ruling about these cases.
Justice Kagan, when she I listened to the oral arguments, which was great fun. Kathy Gellis, your contributor, was there in the room. Yep. She's admitted to the Supreme Court. Justice Kagan at one point said, "These are not the 9 greatest experts on the internet," and the room burst out in laughter, which I don't think is very common in the chambers. But she was, and other justices felt the same way. Admitted that this is a big decision. So there were 2 of them, but this was Gonzalez versus Google, the family of a young woman who was killed, tragically killed in Paris in an ISIS terrorist attack. For some reason, the family decided to blame YouTube, even though there was no direct causal connection. And in particular, the YouTube algorithms recommending ISIS videos, radicalizing people. And it really threatens Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, this 26 words that some say saved the internet, made the internet, that say that you're not responsible, whether it's a website or a chat room or our Discord or our Mastodon instance. We're not responsible for the content people or YouTube post there. That is not something we're publishing. So it gives us 2 rights. 1, the right to leave it up. 2, the right to take it down. We can't be sued for either.
Right.
Is that a fair? You have the best page on Tech Data. Somebody has directed you to this page on Section 230 because you got it wrong, and it's commonly wrong. In fact, I saw a Mastodon toot from you saying, would somebody please refer the New York Times to me before they write about Section 230? Because they just get it wrong. Why? What is it that people get wrong? Why don't they understand this?
There are so many things that they get that people get wrong about 230. It's hard to summarize them in a short form. That's one of the reasons I wrote that article that has all these different things. And what's funny is people get it wrong based on what they want the law to be. Often the exact opposite of what it is. Some people think that if you moderate too much, that you lose your 230 protections, for example. Which the law is actually explicitly the opposite of that.
It's so you can moderate.
Exactly. And it was put in place because of a case that said the opposite, that there was, Prodigy was this company that had moderated and lost, and what became liable for content on their forums because they had moderated. And 230 was designed to protect that and fix that.
Ron Wyden, by the way, second time we've mentioned him, is the guy who wrote 230, and he kind of felt like it was needed because of the CDA. Like he said, we got to carve some safe harbor out for the internet so that people can publish, so they can have forums, they can have communities.
Yeah, and it's it's a very simple law in concept, which is this idea. The real idea behind it is that you want to put the liability on the party who actually did whatever is violating the law, rather than the tools that they use. And if you think of it that way, then it becomes a pretty straightforward.
It makes sense.
Yes.
Right. And you wrote it.
But for whatever reason, people have a lot of trouble with it. And they just really believe that, especially in this case, the real focus of the Gonzalez case was whether or not the algorithm, the recommendation algorithm, is protected by 230 or not protected by 230.
That was one. And I have to say, I came around a little bit. We had a bit of a debate. Jeff Jarvis spanked me on This Week in Google because I said, well, couldn't you? I mean, look, no one loves these algorithms. These algorithms are there to make more money, to make more sticky content, to promote content that keeps people watching. And I'm not saying it's intentional, but inadvertently, as a result, they tend to push more extreme content, more and more extreme content, because that keeps you engaged. So shouldn't they be liable for that?
So there are a couple things on that. One is, whether or not they actually do push more extreme content is there's less and less evidence of that. There were a couple of reports from 7 or 8 years ago that suggested that. There have been multiple studies in the last 3 to 4 years that have actually suggested that's not true. That what the companies have discovered to some extent is that if you're just pushing people further and further down an extremist rabbit hole, that's actually not good for business. It's your advertisers get kind of mad about it.
Well, that's true. Yeah, look at Twitter.
Users get angry and start to go elsewhere. There are all sorts of reasons why companies actually don't, there is this belief certainly that algorithms are only negative and bad. And the reality is that for the most part, many algorithms are actually somewhat helpful. I think the internet would be a lot worse without many of these.
Well, there was an amicus brief filed by Reddit moderators.
Yep.
Who said, without algorithms, we couldn't do our job. And this was the problem. And what's interesting, the justices actually seemed to get it. Even, I was surprised, Brett Kavanaugh basically said, this isn't for us to decide. This is for Congress to decide. Justice Clarence Thomas said, algorithms, you got to have algorithms. Without algorithms, there's no internet. He likes those weird analogies. I think he talked about a pizza joint or something. But in any event, he got it. I was kind of impressed.
I mean,
go ahead.
It is an interesting question that point that without algorithms you can't have the internet. Obviously, we had the internet before algorithms when moderation was done manually. It does not scale.
It just doesn't scale. We had Yahoo, right?
Yeah.
Yahoo was done by humans.
Yeah,
but it was quickly superseded by Excite, Alta Vista, and eventually Google, who used algorithms.
And it is an interesting question. Is an algorithm, is it speech? Is it conduct? Is it a product feature? And there is a case that I don't believe has made it up to the Supreme Court. It's being considered by a court in Georgia about Snapchat getting sued over a speed filter that showed how fast you were going when you posted a Snapchat
I used
story.
that on the Shinkansen in Japan to show how fast I was going. But unfortunately, people also use it while they're driving.
Right, and the point made by the plaintiffs, I believe, was that this encouraged people to use their phone while
Drive
driving,
recklessly. Yes,
right, and Snap ended up pulling the feature, making it kind of a moot point going forward. But that principle of is the way that a site that happens to host speech by its users, the way it operates. Is that itself speech by the publisher of the site? Is it tied into the speech of its users? Or is it, something besides speech? I think that is a fair and interesting legal question, but I'm sure Mike and Alex have thoughts there.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, but it gets back to this simple question of who is the one who is actually violating the law, and what is the law that's being violated, and how is it being violated? So, the Snap case, in terms of the speed filter, I actually think there have been a couple different cases with that same sort of fact pattern. And I think the one that has gotten the most attention, which is Snap v. Lemon, I think that was decided incorrectly, where they said that Snap doesn't get 230 protections. That case is then gone back and is currently in discovery about whether or not Snap is actually liable. This was one of the mistakes that the New York Times recently made in their reporting. They said that the court said that Snap was liable, which has not actually been determined in a court yet. So if you look at that case as an example, what is it that Snap is actually doing? Right. So they have created this filter that tells you what your speed is. Is that encouraging speeding? That's kind of an open question, you could say. But even if it was, is that by itself violating the law? Is encouraging someone to speed by itself violating the law? It's not. So, the idea that there's some sort of legal liability here beyond that doesn't really make sense. The person who is violating the law is the person who's actually speeding. And so, putting the blame on the person who's actually speeding is the right thing to do. And all that 230 does in these cases, in this case, they got around 230, but, is make sure that you're talking about putting the legal liability on the party who's actually taking the action which violates the law.
Right, but Mike, product liability, product liability law does not forbid you to manufacture a product that could be dangerous. It's all a question of when you discover that the product is dangerous, who's at fault.
Here's a similar example. Who's responsible if a Tesla running full self-driving causes a fatality? Is it the driver who used the full self-driving? Under your argument, Mike, it would be, but I think Tesla advertising full self-driving when it clearly doesn't work might give them some liability too, right?
Right. What if you take advice from ChatGPT?
Yeah. Oh, there's your problem right there. The court in the Lemon versus Snap said, well, Snapchat made a product that was unsafe, in effect. Which doesn't seem unreasonable to me.
And you're free to make products that are unsafe. It's just you'll be
liable for it. And clearly, the kids who caused the fatal crash were the main culprits. But Snapchat does have a responsibility. Don't they not to make stuff that encourages bad behavior? I don't know.
But I think that it's one thing for you to build a tool that actually generates behavior, which is what all tools do. I mean, we oftentimes say when we're talking about measurement is that you don't measure what matters. What you measure matters. It becomes something that's important. And if you talk to YouTubers, for instance, they are obsessed with the algorithm. They are obsessed with what does the algorithm do with when people watch this a certain amount of time? How does it handle the thumbnails? How does it do all these other things? So behavior is definitely driven by those algorithms. And so the thing is that that's when you're generating those things, if it's generating bad behavior, that's one thing. But then the other side of this is like when people put things on TikTok that are dangerous, do you have I think part of this is, and this is where 230, I think, comes into a little bit more of a situation. When you're creating something as a company, you're still probably liable. When you are allowing content to go onto your site that is driving people towards a behavior, some kind of herd behavior that is damaging, are you liable for that? Now, I think that I think the idea of tampering with 230 is terrifying. I don't think that there's any version of this, any way that you can unwrap 230 in a way. And I feel so strongly about it that when someone on Twitter or somewhere else posts anything that's positive about dismantling or even tweaking 230, I immediately make an intelligence decision about them.
I agree.
I disagree. It's not like I disagree with you. It is, I will never believe
you're an idiot
on anything ever again. It is there's this, a lot of times we think of risk as the chances of something going wrong multiplied by the consequences. That is the math of risk, right? And the chances of something going wrong are medium. the consequences are catastrophic.
Yeah.
And you're just talking about fiddling with something that we've built and whether it was perfect or not, it doesn't matter anymore.
Well, actually, that was interesting. One of the judges, I think it was Kavanaugh, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, did in effect say that the consequences to the economy of changing 230 could be dire.
Yeah, that was Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh, honestly, and I wrote this, I'm kind of hoping that he writes whatever the decision is out of this. And I would not consider myself, generally speaking, a Brett Kavanaugh fan. But I was, he's ruled on a couple cases that sort of touched on internet and free speech issues, and really actually does seem to get that and to get the deeper nuances here. And that became clear in the oral arguments in both of the cases last week, that he really seems to recognize that getting this wrong will have massive consequences for both speech and for sort of economic development and innovation. And so he's the one who seems most spooked by the possibility of getting this wrong. And I think that is the right attitude to have.
Yeah. Is it
possible to narrow Section 230?
There's a good question.
Without overturning it,
not that I've seen. Like I of course I am open to the idea that is possible if somebody could show me a way to do that. And to date, nobody has shown me a way that doesn't really obliterate the entire law. Every sort of narrow change to 230 that I've seen in reality obliterates the law. And Kathy Gellis, my colleague, wrote a piece a couple of years ago, I think, that effectively said that, which is that, any reform to 230 really is a repeal to 230. And this gets somewhat into the weeds, but it's sort of how 230 actually works and what the mechanism is, because I think people sort of get confused by that. The reality is that Section 230 is the sort of, procedural benefit that gets rid of frivolous cases very early on. And if you change that in any way, all you're really doing is asking people to have to go through long and expensive court processes in order to prove that they were right in the first place. And once you've sort of opened up the legal process and the expensive
this reminds me of fair use.
There are fantastic similarities to sort of the fair use thing,
because fair use means you go to court.
Right. I mean, that's the famous Larry Lessig line is fair use just means the right to hire a lawyer.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's all it is. And you're going to have to fight over it. And because of that, what happens? We really don't have fair use.
It's
we don't
a chilling effect. Yeah. I am very careful
yeah.
about what we put on this podcast because YouTube will take it down, even though it's fair. I know it's fair use. And if I asked them, they'd say so. Certainly a lawyer would. Doesn't matter. It's a chilling effect because I'm not going to go to court to defend it.
Right. So almost any reform, and I would say every reform that I've seen of 230 really does that. It basically just means you're going to have to go through a very long and very expensive court process, which means many companies won't. They'll just back down. And it sort of gives people a heckler's veto that would stop whatever it is those companies are doing,
That's a really
whether
good,
it's good or bad.
That's an excellent point. Because just even slicing a sliver off means suddenly, well, now the court has to decide. So you really, by not keeping it an integral whole, the whole is what protects you against frivolous lawsuits. Any sliver, does that make sense, Owen? That any sliver, then now suddenly we have to adjudicate.
Well, I think I think that Mike does an excellent point. Mike does an excellent job of untangling what is actually in Section 230, versus say the First Amendment, and they definitely are intertwined in that, your First Amendment right to put something on your website or not is kind of, is fundamental to understanding how Section 230 plays out. But, I do wonder if what we're after is the underlying speech or conduct and putting the right responsibility, the right liability where it belongs. We do have to look at these cases where it's, is this really speech? Is this really,
Well, and I would say, and this is more about the Snap versus Lemon case, you don't want a carte blanche to let companies create anything they want. And, you do want some product liability. You don't want to say Section 230 extends so far that a company could do anything it wants. And if somebody does something stupid with it, it's their fault.
I think that the thing is that the company's doing something is one thing, their users doing something. So I think that's the important piece, is when their user puts something on their site, then that protects the company from that. When the company does something, and I've worked with a lot of these companies, and so they pay a lot of attention to liability, because generally, this is a very different thing.
Well, and
in
that was the
Gonzalez
debate,
case,
though.
You're talking about claiming.
That was the debate in court, was, did Google's algorithm, was that the company doing something, right?
Yeah, and I think that, the company creating a product that affects many, many things and may inadvertently affect something that they're continuing to work on, I think is one thing. Them creating a contest that obviously drives people towards an unhealthy behavior is a different thing. And I think that I do think that an algorithm that is generally working for most people and happen to do something which they haven't even proven yet, is probably, something that is very hard to plan. And again, I think that 230 is imperfect. I think that it probably could have been written better with hindsight. They were writing it. We have to remember that 230 was written when they had no idea what was going to happen. Like it was, and so now we've built but now it is a cornerstone, of a giant building which forms the world's economy. And you're talking about like, well, that thing was a little
off here.
It should have been. Why don't we just take this centerpiece, this part out of it, and if it. Again, the consequences is, we don't get it right. It'll have the entire
building
corner
falls over.
It's like saying, I think we're going to change and have the gas be something slightly different, and all engines and all all gas stations have to change if we do this, or someone can pass a law that forces everybody to change everything across the United States.
Now you're talking Formula One. That's a different matter entirely.
No, but we're going to change the formula of gas, and we're going to just say that's going. We'll just tweak it a little bit and see how it works. And it's a big economy that you're starting about turning over. So I think it's so dangerous. Like it is. It's again what we call fissionable material. Like you could really cause so much damage.
There was a quote I saw yesterday that. Section 230 is the load-bearing wall of the internet, and I think there's some truth to that. And just to make up an important point here, when you start to talk about the difference between speech and conduct, which is where a lot of these discussions are going, and sort of where I think Owen was going with his comments, and where like the Julia Angwin New York Times opinion piece last week was saying, separate out speech and conduct. The problem is that every single plaintiff and every single plaintiff's lawyer know exactly what they'll do in that case. And that is they will declare everything to be conduct rather than speech. And then you're at that point that I was talking about where you have to litigate it. And once you have to litigate it, you've lost all of the value of Section 230. Even if the defendants in all of these cases are going to win, just the fact that you've now set it up that you have to litigate the question of 230 and then go to discovery, perhaps go to trial, all of this stuff that is extremely expensive that will force most companies to either change their practices or settle cases too early, even if they would have won in the long run, effectively wipes out the tremendous value and benefits of Section 230.
Angwin's piece, which she probably did not write the headline for, but it definitely had a link bait headline. It's time to tear up big tech's get out of jail free card. That's the kind of rhetoric that really does spark flames.
I wrote a response to this, and at first I actually had a whole paragraph where I said, she probably didn't write the headline, and I sort of ripped apart the headline. But then as I was going through the article, she basically did say almost exactly that in the article, and so I pulled that out. She might not have written the headline, but she got pretty close to it in the article. I think and I have tremendous respect for Julia Angwin. I think she's a wonderful investigative reporter. I think a lot of her reporting has been really, really important over the last decade in terms of exposing, questionable activities by all of the big companies. And I think that's a really valuable thing. But I do not think this was her best work. And in fact, I think it had multiple factual errors, and then it really just did not understand what Section 230 does, and her focus on how to, what she claimed, fix the law or take away the get out of jail free card, which it is not a get out of jail free card. This is a very important point. It is a put the liability on the actual party that did the wrong thing card, and get the innocent tool provider away from having to deal with an expensive litigation, vexatious litigation card. Once you begin to understand those things, her piece was very, very confused and misguided.
There's a certain similarity between the first discussion we had about encryption, both enabling good things and bad things, and her arguments against Section 230. She asserts that Section 230 lets big tech kind of get away with stuff or defer responsibility for things they create. And I agree with you, Mike. It's a little hard to justify. But it is kind of that argument that there are benefits from 230 and there perhaps are adverse effects of 230. This is the way of the world. Nothing is 100% good or 100% bad, but we do have to decide what's important to us. And I would say encryption is important to us, to security and privacy. And 230, I know, is important to me. I wouldn't have a chat room. I wouldn't have a Discord. I wouldn't have a forums. I wouldn't have a Mastodon if I were liable for anything somebody puts there or anything I take down from there. So in the balance, I think that's more important to preserve that discourse on the internet than it is that Facebook maybe can get away with, redlining for some period of time.
And all I'd say is that, approximately 46,000 people die in cars every day, every year.
Right.
In the United States.
We don't ban cars.
They are very useful.
Yeah.
Just regular cars. People living their lives. 46,000 people die.
Right. Bad
Things happen because cars exist. And it doesn't. You're not going to get to a point where we get that to zero.
We do, though, Alex, significantly regulate vehicles for that reason.
The primary and I will admit that the primary regulation of vehicles is lawsuits. Like liability is the primary way that vehicles are regulated. But at the same time, what I would say is that there's nothing you're not going to ever be perfect. You're not going to get
no
to
law
zero.
is going to Yeah.
And what we try to do is not have laws cause more damage than they cause good, and it's unclear, and it's just we have something that is working fairly well right now, very imperfect, but the consequences of changing this is so radical that I think it'd be reckless. And I think that it sounded like the Supreme Court was leaning that direction.
You never know. Mike, you made that point in your article that you can't tell from oral arguments what they're going to do. But I was quite relieved, and I know I'm not alone, that they sounded like at least they acknowledged their limits, the difficulty of this, and the potential hazards of it. They seemed pretty clear.
It certainly could have been much worse, but still, like, the devil's very much in the details.
They could do one little thing that would be disastrous, right? It doesn't have
exactly.
to. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the real fear at this point, which is that, they like many people see as like, oh, well, a little tweak won't matter that much. And they don't quite understand, how that would play out. Nobody understands exactly how that will play out. Those of us who spend a lot of time looking at this can sort of game out where we think a lot of these things are going to go and how much damage they would do. But, so the real fear at this point, they do recognize it. It was definitely like there was a sort of sigh of relief in listening to the oral arguments and seeing what they were saying, that they weren't leaning towards like a full scale, like 230 doesn't apply at all. And in fact, like everybody sort of expected that Justice Thomas and Justice Alito in particular were probably the main reasons why this case was being heard, because it was kind of a surprise. People didn't expect
it. Wasn't a strong case
to take this case at all.
Terrible case.
Yeah. And yet they were also really skeptical of the plaintiff's argument. And so that was kind of eye-opening.
The thinking was that politically they wanted some excuse to overturn 230. And so they were casting around for any 230 case they could. And they gave cert to this case, even though it was a fairly weak case. I mean, the plaintiffs don't even assert that the people who killed their daughter, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Were watching YouTube videos. There's not, it's like there's no.
I think that the easiest way out for the Supreme Court is just to declare that there's no standing.
Kathy said that. Kathy said they could even at this point say, "Oh, we made a mistake. We shouldn't have taken this case. Forget it."
Yeah, they can. It's called dig, right? It's improvidently dismissed for improvidently granted.
I love that.
We could dig the case, which is basically say we never should have taken this in the and I mean, which would honestly probably be the best result, but also like kind of frustrating when you look at how much time everybody spent.
Right.
There were whatever 90 amicus briefs or whatever filed in this case, and every major law firm, representing me.
Right.
So yes.
Right. Would it open the door for yet another 230 case to come through if they digged it?
Yes.
And that's the problem. We want to resolve this. We want a firm affirmation of 230.
It would be, but the chances are of that happening in this case is actually pretty slim as well. Yeah. And what is going to happen almost certainly next term, and some people will say these are not actually 230 cases, though I would argue they really are 230 cases. Is that the Florida social media content moderation law and the Texas content moderation law? Yeah. Like those were both supposed to be heard by the Supreme Court this term, and they sort of punted on it and asked the U.S. government to weigh in, which was weird because it's unclear what the U.S. government is going to say that is going to influence the Supreme Court's decision on whether or not to hear these cases. But really, it seemed like that was a way to say, like, let's not deal with this until next term. And that's going to be an even bigger and more important series of cases, again, with the caveat, like, that could change depending on what the Supreme Court decides in the Gonzalez case when it comes out in most likely June. All right.
Does this make you, Owen, glad that you don't write about tech that much anymore?
No, it actually makes me think that it's a great illustration of when this law was first written and passed in the 90s. We were really thinking about a model of like internet service providers and like users posting on homepages. Or
this was CompuServe era, right?
Yeah, and it really did not embrace the idea of like massive scale algorithmic recommendation. And even as this is being heard and potentially decided on, like, that set of facts, that generation of technology, we are moving forward to generative AI. And I'm really curious, like, who is the author of speech generated by a chatbot? Is it OpenAI for ChatGPT? Is it the user who is feeding in prompts and therefore operating a program, and usually, the operator of a program that produces output is thought of as the author of that output? News organizations are already talking about potentially suing OpenAI for, ChatGPT incorporating their work. I mean, there's going to be a whole bunch of issues that are coming up now that are not going to be addressed by whatever is decided in these cases.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that actually came up a little bit in the case, and Neil Gorsuch brought up the AI and the generative AI aspect to it, and wondering whether or not the Gonzalez versus Google case actually, how that impacted those discussions, because certainly when that case was brought, we didn't have ChatGPT and all of these things out there, and so now it is a really big question. And there was an article last week also on Lawfare by Matt Peralt claiming that Section 230 doesn't protect ChatGPT output. And I'm not sure that article is
that's
correct.
Interesting.
Yeah. And a lot of people read that and sort of were promoting it and saying, oh, okay, well, this is settled. And I don't think I necessarily agree with his analysis. I think it is more of an open question that, I think basically all of the points that Owen brought up are unclear. And, is it based on the prompts? And if it's based on the prompts, is that user generated content? I'm not sure we know that yet. And I think it's a lot more fuzzy than we know right now. And I think it is going to be a big battle that the courts are going to have to deal with, in the same way that they're dealing with the question of whether or not output from these things are copyrightable, or whether or not the inputs to these to the large language learning models or whatever are similarly copyrightable. There are a lot of really big legal questions raised by the generative AI space, both for copyright and for 230 and for a variety of other things. And there will be no shortage of stuff for you to be talking about, Leo, over the next few years.
Matt's contention is that in effect, large language models and ChatGPT are information content providers, so protected. Wow, that's a bit of a leap.
Yeah, I'm not sure his. I mean, it's an interesting article. It's thought provoking, and a lot of people were convinced by it. I am not sure that the courts will see it the same way.
Yeah. Similarly, the Copyright Office says you can't copyright a Midjourney drawing, nor can Midjourney copyright a Midjourney drawing. And go ahead, Owen. You could in theory copyright the prompt. The prompt,
if the prompt is creative enough.
Yeah.
To register for copyright. It'll be very interesting. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off.
We live in interesting times.
No. I think there is absolutely going to be a product liability lawsuit over generative AI. Some answer that one of these chatbots gives is going to be acted on by someone, and then they are going to sue
I'll give you a case.
The company that operates the bot.
I'll give you a case you could file right now. Script kiddies have used ChatGPT to write malware and use it. And if I were one of those people attacked by malware, I'd sue the script kiddies and I'd sue OpenAI because they wrote it.
I'm not sure the court would. I mean, against the actual person who used the malware,
they used it.
Sure,
but it wrote it.
But the AI generator, I don't think you would win that case. I think you would lose.
Well, I'm not going to file it. So there. Let's take a break. I can't afford it. So that's why I'm going to do another ad. And maybe I can after this ad. How about that? Okay. We have what a great panel. Alex, Lindsay, it's so nice to have you in a different venue, so to speak.
It's fun to be here. It's fun to talk about something other than just Macs.
Yes.
I love Apple. I love Macs, but it's fun to have big, wider conversations.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel the same way. 090.media to hire him. officehours.global to get to know him. How about that?
Yeah, that's right.
Owen Thomas, the Herb Cain of Silicon Valley. Columnist at the Examiner. I love your columns. Like, we're going to talk about one of them. Hayes Valley is the center of AI in San Francisco. Okay, I gotta have to dig down on that.
Oh yes, let's dig in.
Great to have you, Owen, and of course Mike Masnick, who it's always a privilege when we can get you on, Mike. I know you're a busy guy, but boy, what a great week to have you and Kathy Gellis on two different shows. Because I feel like I'm much better informed on all this stuff than I would have been otherwise. I mean, you're really good. Really appreciate it.
Always nice to hear.
Yeah. Our show today brought to you by Worldwide Technology. It's the last trip Lisa and I took before COVID. It was March 2020. Before shutdown began, we went out to Missouri to look at the Advanced Technology Center that WWT has. You were there too, weren't you, Alex? Did you come up with us? I think you did.
Yeah, it was great. Well, not only that, I went there. We spoke. It was we did
a great panel.
Amazing location.
Yeah,
great panel. And really, I didn't know that WWT was there.
Me neither.
And then I've actually had the opportunity to build projects with them.
Oh, nice.
So actually do projects after that. We got together and built some apps.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So and they are just amazing to work with. Like, I just have to say that I was thoroughly impressed. Now every time I think about something, I'm like, well, then we'll have WWT do this. Because it's just they provide. I mean, they're super organized, super high level. Brings me to the ground of like, I got a big idea, and then they just figure it all out. And
they somewhat hide their light beneath a bushel. For instance, that app development, we never talk about that, but they do app development that's pretty amazing. We went to the out there. Mary Jo Foley was there too. We saw the Advanced Technology Center. It's funny, the history of WWT. Oh, I should explain what they do probably before we go much further. They partner with big companies for enterprise technology. So if you need storage, if you're going to the cloud, if you want hybrid cloud, if you want security, if you need apps done, they do so many things. As I said, I think they kind of hide their light under a bushel. They do so many things. But at the heart of WWT is this Advanced Technology Center. It's kind of amazing. One little building when they started 10 years ago, it's spread and spread. Now it's like multiple buildings, rack after rack. Basically, all $500 million worth of equipment, all of the leading OEMs, all of the little emerging disruptors. And why did they do that? Well, initially they did it because their engineers needed it so they could get to know the technology, so they could spin up proofs of concepts, so they could build projects for their clients. But then they had this brilliant insight. This was a couple of years ago. It was actually after we visited them. They decided to open it up to everybody. They virtualized it. And now anybody who's a member of the ATC platform, and by the way, that's free, can access the labs remotely from anywhere in the world, any time of the day or night. The Advanced Technology Center has hundreds of on-demand and schedulable labs featuring solutions that include technologies representing the newest advances in every area of enterprise technology: cloud, security, networking, primary and secondary storage, data analytics, AI, of course, DevOps, and so much more. WWT's engineers and partners use the ATC to spin up proofs of concept and pilots, which helps customers confidently select the best solutions, cuts evaluation time from months to weeks. That's one of the things that makes WWT so special, so nimble. The thing I should really say about WWT is they're business people too. So yeah, they're technologists, but they understand that all this technology has to go hand in hand with your business strategy. It is not existing in a vacuum. And so they're very good about understanding what your goals are and making it work. And you can do the same with the ATC. Test out products and solutions before you go to market. It's more than just the labs you can do. There's technical articles, white papers, expert insights, demonstration videos, and of course, all the community stuff they do, like that panel that Alex, Mary Jo, and I did all those years ago. We got to go out there again. WWT makes this available to everybody. The ATC platform, it can be yours. All you have to do is go to wwt.com/twit. It's free. Check out WWT's events and communities, too, for all sorts of ways you can learn about technology trends, hear about the latest research and insights from their experts. This company's a partner. That's their goal. They want to be your partner. They want to help you understand this, how it fits in with your strategy. Whatever your business needs, WWT can deliver scalable, tried and tested, tailored solutions. Worldwide technology brings strategy and execution together to make that new world happen for you. Learn more about WWT, the Advanced Technology Center. Gain access to all the free resources. It's really simple. Just go to wwt.com/twit. Create a free account on the ATC platform. Wait, it's time to go out there. I miss the fried ravioli. wwt.com/twit. And we thank WWT for all the support. All this time, they've been a great partner with us. Worldwide technology. Okay, let's see. I think we did our Supreme Court. There were actually two cases. Did the second case not impact Section 230, Mike? That was kind of the impression I got on the Wednesday case.
Yeah, the second case, the fact pattern behind it was actually almost identical to the first case. But
it was about Twitter, right?
Twitter and another terrorist attack that killed someone. There have been sort of maybe half a dozen of these kinds of cases. It's just that these two were the ones that went to the Supreme Court.
It does feel like Scalia, not Scalia. He's been replaced.
Yes,
the Clarence Thomas and Alioto. I'm getting old in my old age. Alioto is a former mayor of San Francisco. Alito had cherry-picked a couple of cases.
Yeah.
But maybe didn't do the best cherry-picking.
Yeah. And so the Tamna versus Twitter case technically did not cover Section 230 because of the way that the Ninth Circuit ruled on it. So, that case was more direct on the question of whether or not, it was, I forget what the terrorist act is, the ATA sort of helping terrorists.
Right.
And so that was more direct on that. And so not directly on point related to 230.
They were comparing Twitter to a bank that gives terrorists money.
Yeah.
The Twitter, by putting ISIS tweets up, was in effect aiding and abetting terrorism. And I think that's a long way to go.
Yeah, it's an argument that is unlikely to succeed, but in some ways was kind of interesting because it sort of presented the world in which you don't have 230, in which you have to go through that argument, and you have to, it's kind of what I was talking about before, where if you slice away 230, then suddenly you have to go through these more detailed, much more expensive arguments in court about whether or not, who is liable for which part and why. And so that's really what we saw, was like these crazy analogies that were happening and everybody debating back and forth. Is it like a bank? Is it like something else? Which is what you would have to see in all of these other cases that, really silly cases that thankfully got dismissed because of Section 230. So the relationship to 230 with the Tamna case is effectively like, here's what the unfortunate situation that the world would look like if we got rid of 230 is we would be arguing about all of these things in every single case where something went wrong and someone tried to blame the internet for it.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. It's going to be June maybe before we get these decisions?
Almost certainly June. In theory, it could come anytime between now and the end of the session.
Right.
They could. But chances are with like big cases like this, where there's certainly going to be some debate and discussion in the chambers, it almost certainly will come out sometime in June.
Okay. Well, we'll wait with bated breath, and it could, regardless of what they said at oral arguments, it could go badly for the internet. And
Yes.
then we'll see. So enjoy your Mastodon, Discord, Discourse, IRC. Well, you got it, kids. Well, that's the irony of this. Everybody talks about big tech, but big tech could support these lawsuits. It's people like us, you and me, Mike.
Yeah.
That would just.
Well, that's why. The amicus brief that we submitted that Kathy wrote for us, it wasn't just for me. We also had Chris Riley on it, and Chris runs a Mastodon instance, techpolicy.social, for people in the sort of tech policy world. And we thought it was really important for the Supreme Court to be reminded that Section 230 also protects whoever is running a Mastodon instance.
Right.
And so that was,
they somewhat want to punish big tech, right? That's what the right really wants to do, is punish big tech. And the left, too, frankly.
There's, I forget which bill it was, but one bill attempted to impose like moderation requirements based on the size of a company measured by market cap, and of course, 50 million. Meta, in the course of, I think it was
Twitter and Meta,
500 billion.
500
yeah,
million?
I think,
okay.
500 billion, and I think their market cap actually fell
below it,
whatever the threshold was. So it's like, they were trying to go after big tech, and it ended up being medium tech instead.
And it's like it's a good example. Here in California, we have this thing AB5, which they aimed at Uber and Lyft, missed them, and just caused mass chaos. This is like my resistance to things like 230 are definitely driven from AB5 because it impacts my business a lot. We hire a lot of.
A lot of our freelancers. We wouldn't have Ant. Ant had to quit his job because he was living in California. He couldn't work at Tech Republic because he couldn't be a freelancer because of AB, whatever.
And AB5 was such a disaster. It has literally shaken my belief in government regulation. It was just so bad. Like it was. Yeah. And when I think about what could happen with 230, I think of AB5, and it's so bad that they won't repeal it because no one wants to talk about it anymore. Like no one wants to. Like no one even wants to have it come up in the press because they screwed it up so badly. And so, but I think that what happened was they missed the target, just like we're talking here. They completely missed the targets, and then just hailed every, just buckshot across the entire every industry. It's a complete disaster.
Then they started putting in all these exemptions for industries that had powerful lobbyists in Sacramento, and that's kind of a direction you can see if they start.
We follow it very carefully. In the company that I work in, we follow AB5 to the letter.
So do we. We have to.
And you follow it to the letter. But I was talking to someone in Hollywood, and they're like, "Oh, no one pays attention to that. Everyone just ignores it." And I was like, "Why do they ignore it?" I'm like, "Because it's a really bad idea, and we make videos. Like the thing is that
if they go after us, we're gonna.
If they go after us, we will bury them.
Oh, good. Maybe I can ignore it then.
That's with Aries, and I wouldn't. But what I'm saying,
you're kind of a freelancer these days. Do you have to pay attention to this? Does this hurt your business?
It has not come up. There was an issue with freelancers that I think got resolved with either like an amendment to the law or like a different interpretation. There was a crazy situation where, if you were a videographer, it didn't apply, but if you were a photographer, it did, based on the number of works. And then, the question about, is a photo shoot, one work, or is each individual photo? And
it's like if you bring your computer, we've had some folks that are if they bring their laptop, they're no longer fitting under AB5. As long as they bring their laptop and their laptop, they do work on it, and it's just. And this just shows you government run awry. So it's
Twitter, speaking thereof, just came in a couple hours ago. Yesterday we heard that 50 people were fired. Now, according to Zoe Schiffer on Platformer, confirmed by Alex Heath of The Verge, we learn who some of those people are, including the woman in charge of Twitter Blue, Esther Crawford, and most of the Twitter Blue team. Fired yesterday.
Things are going well.
Twitter Blue is by the numbers, this thing is never going to be a meaningful contributor to Twitter's.
It was something like 100,000 people have signed up for this $8 a month plan. So
and the amount of angst and agonizing that that's gone on over Twitter Blue and the verification component of it, and all of that, and it's not a meaningful contributor to the business, is the bottom line.
Well, and there's some speculation. The Verge is speculating that maybe this is the beginning of what some have expected of Elon just putting in his whole team, a loyal to Elon team running everything.
Well, the thing is, Esther Crawford, who was apparently laid off, was the one who famously slept on the floor of Twitter and had posted excitedly about it on Twitter, about how, if you really love your job, you sleep on the floor or whatever. And now people are pointing out, well, how did that work out?
I loved you, Elon. I loved you, and you broke up with me. She was the one. She was the one with the hashtag sleep where you work, which honestly, just take it from me, not a good idea.
Yeah.
I have this other theory, and this is based on just a long observation of Musk, which is that Esther Crawford was getting too much attention. She was prominently profiled.
Yeah.
And
you don't like that.
Musk wants to take credit for everything that happens at his companies.
Right. Not only does he want to be the number one person on Twitter, like one of his most recent tweets, why can't witchcraft defeat inflation? Or something about something Einstein, or Sunday, the first day of the rest of your life, or rewatching. Notice, by the way, how my For You section is completely filled with Elon. Rewatching Step Brothers, so good. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that, Elon. By the way, a lot of engagement on that. 30.4 million people viewing it, 163,000 people liking it. Not as many as the first day of the rest of your life. That was 165,000.
I mean, if you were a Twitter engineer who wanted to have, any kind of career at the company, wouldn't you write a script that just like inflates Elon Musk's tweet counts?
Oh, that's what they did.
Apparently, that's what's happened.
That's what they did. I think that's been more or less confirmed, that, because he freaked out after the Super Bowl, right, where Joe Biden's tweet got more attention than his did, and he said that's clearly wrong, that's clearly a problem, because how could that be? And therefore they wrote this script that effectively gave a boost to Elon's tweets, and it sounds like they had to tweak it, but then he denied all of that. The whole thing is,
but it's happening again. Is I guess my point, which is it did stop for a while. And now he's back, baby. So, yeah.
Your mistake is logging into Twitter.
Well, I don't. And I just thought this is for work purposes. Actually, I like to go to Twitter just to see what the trending topics are.
Sure.
And not because it's so valuable, because usually it's just nonsense. But it's interesting, I guess.
Yeah, I have to admit, I think the problem is that I kind of got off of everything else. Like, I stopped really going to Facebook, and I don't really, I should go to LinkedIn more than I do, and I don't do any of the other ones. So Twitter is like my last bastion of where I'm at. So it gets into a little like, well, I'm here. I don't have any, I don't have a lot of other places. Yeah, I tweet. But my tweets are mostly I answer people's tweets and I have funny things to say. I don't really have any strong need for it, but it is useful as an engine for when I want to point people towards something. And so and it's working fine. I mean, I have to admit, I am so aggressive with blocking and muting that my Twitter hasn't changed at all.
Yeah.
like it is like completely the same, but I mute like 200 words. I block. I don't know. Someone just posts something. I go, yeah, I don't want to hear from them anymore.
Yeah.
Boom. And I just block things all the time. And I don't. And so what's happened is that I follow audio engineers and programmers and some press people and my friends, and I have an awesome Twitter feed. Like when people say, "Oh, my Twitter feed is," I'm like, "You're not pruning it." Like if your Twitter feed is horrible, like I just have this prune which looks like a chainsaw.
But you don't ever go to the For You tab, I bet you, because the For You tab is not who you're following.
But it's greatly affected by it, and my For You tab is fine, because again, it doesn't show me. I have 200 muted words. It doesn't show me a lot of things.
So that
and
still
so the
works.
thing is that the mute works inside of that, and it's like it's politics and other things like that. I'm like, I don't look at Twitter for news. I look at it purely for enjoyment. And so if I'm not enjoying my feed, I look at who's making me not enjoy that feed, and I just look at the words that they're using, and I go mute that one, mute that one, mute that one, and I won't hear from them anymore. And so the thing is that it's really, for me, it's really easy. And again, I look at it like I don't have another platform right now that I'm going to go to that has any flow. And so I haven't left, mostly because there's nowhere else to go. But I would say that, and again, just because I don't use the other platforms, but I've pruned this one so effectively over a decade. As soon as I learned that mute words was a thing, I started getting aggressive, and it's like my favorite toy, is to figure out how I'm going to mute.
And I guess you're not Twitter Blue. You're not giving him money, right?
I am.
Oh, you are?
Twitter Blue.
Oh, you're paying for it.
Yeah, because otherwise again, it's like, and I have to admit, I work in a lot of countries. I work in a lot of states. I look at everything from a very pragmatic, like when I'm in this country, I just do the thing. And for me, Twitter is just the country that I'm in. Sure. I don't have another platform that I really use other than Discord. I mean, I'm on Discord and I'm in things in my, my own stuff, but I don't have another one to go to. And it is important for what I do. so It is. And I will admit, I get at least two lattes worth of enjoyment out of it. So I am Twitter Blue, and I don't know if it makes any difference or not. But again, it was just kind of like, well, sure.
It makes me would make me ill to give Elon any money, but I guess if I visit Twitter, I'm just costing him money, so that's not so bad. I don't know. I don't tweet. I will never tweet
my
again.
$8.
Yeah. I just don't want to support that kind of thing. I'm
kind of the.
Go ahead.
Oh,
I will say the other thing is I just want to say I have a very low opinion about many people that I may give money to. I look at it as true. I need it. Like the thing is that if we start talking about, well, I can't buy this because this
I
company
admit it.
does
I
this,
bought Hogwarts. I bought whatever that Hogwarts game was.
But
I admit it. I'm ashamed of it. I don't usually admit it in public.
Like we used to think that lots of people were great, and we find out more about them, and they're like,
no, they're all horrible.
So much.
People are horrible.
And so the thing is that so I don't make my decisions about whether I'm going to use that based on that, because it's just point. If you start pulling on that on that thread of I'm not going to do a business because. But
I'm not reading any more Dilberts. I'm sorry, that's it right there.
No more Dilberts. Yeah,
no more Dilberts for me.
I'll never read Dilbert again. I don't know if I've ever actually read Dilbert, so it's really easy for me to promise.
It's funny when you read it now in light of all of this.
The filter makes it a little.
You kind of now understand why it's the way it is. Sorry, we keep interrupting you. Please, Owen. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say I'm the opposite of Alex in how I use Twitter. I actually use it as a news reader. I find it very helpful for following, for example, the war in Ukraine, where, sure, I could go to Google News or CNN or any number of sources and get like news articles, but I really like following the Kyiv Independence war correspondent Ilya Ponomarenko.
No, that's true. Yeah,
and and he's still posting on Twitter, and his updates are very very interesting, tactical, informative, and there is still a lot of stuff on Twitter that is not elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I think we dismiss the value that's there at our.
Well, but that should also make you angrier at Elon, right? I mean, he's ruining this good thing.
Well, it was a good thing.
He's also defending Scott Adams on it, so
of course he is.
There you go.
Of course he is.
And it's a really good thing, and I don't know if it could be. One of the things you look at as these things get built up, and I don't know what you would replace it with, as far as what it does, and so I'm not.
Well, Mike and I like Mastodon a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I found that Mastodon has almost entirely replaced Twitter for me.
Yep.
And, the other thing is I definitely for, probably about a decade was relying on Twitter as my main source of news. And that has gone away. And now it is a combination of Mastodon, and I've gone back to using RSS readers and
God bless them. They're still around.
They're still around, and as I've sort of gotten back into the habit of using RSS readers, which I used prior to sort of relying on Twitter, I've sort of realized like how much I missed it and how much better the experience is.
What RSS feeder do you use?
So now, because I've gone back, I'm sort of like re-experimenting with ones. But the one I'm using right now is just mainly is FreshRSS, which is a very, very simple, lightweight RSS reader. And I found it to be really, really valuable. There are a couple other ones that people have recommended that this week I'm going to start playing around with to see, but I found FreshRSS as just, if you just want something very lightweight and straightforward, I've been really happy with it.
Those of us who do the news need something that we can do a beat check, for want of a better word, where we can daily go through and see what all the stories are. And that's how I prepare for all the shows. I select stories and all that. And it's interesting because there was an RSS winter after Google Reader went away, where people just said, "Oh, it's over. RSS is dead." But it's not, because there's all these little things like FreshRSS that are FreshRSS has been around a while, but they're growing in the abandoned lot that is the RSS universe. All of these weeds are growing. I use something called Sumi.news, which is not self-hosted. It's a page where you can follow stuff, and this really scratches my itch. But I also have NetNewsWire and Reader and all of these others. I have to try FreshRSS. You host it yourself?
No, there are a few hosted versions.
Okay.
So basically, in order to test it out, and I've been using it for now, I think about 3 weeks, I found one of the hosted versions, and I've just been using that. I think it's hosted in France.
Oh, interesting.
So
there's one I see a lot of people, a lot of geeks using called Tiny RSS, which is it's a Docker container. It's similar. It's you host it yourself.
Yep.
And actually, I want to create RSSs, and so I've been looking at Feedly, which costs money.
Feedly's great, though. Yeah,
but it's kind of industrial version of. I'm going to look at what I want to do is be able to look at a bunch of feeds coming in, and then select the articles that I think are interesting, and then generate a new feed from that.
Yeah.
So that if people want to follow that, and I've been kind of experimenting with figuring out how to do that.
That you would like about Mastodon is any account can be an RSS feed. So if you say I'm going to follow Mike Masnick, let me look him up real quickly. Oh. What's your handle?
It's just M Masnick.
M. There you go. So I'm gonna look up Mike. I see him there, and now I can add RSS to the end of his feed, and I will have an RSS feed which is a pretty good idea. I should do an RSS feed of Mike. Mike, though, you gotta put the rel.me in your linkings there.
I know.
We gotta know it's you, man.
I know there are a whole bunch of things that I need to do that I haven't quite gotten to, because we're sort of debating. We'll probably set up our own.
You're gonna do your own,
Mastodon instance, but like I've been sort of waiting, because there are sort of these like various forks of Mastodon that are looking pretty interesting that I know people are working on.
Yes.
And it's like, do I want to set this up until some of these projects are released? And so I've been holding off, and that includes like, the verification.
What does it take to put together a Mastodon server?
Shouldn't say First of all, let's not say Mastodon. Let's say Fediverse. Right. And let's say ActivityPub, because really all you have to do is hook into ActivityPub, and you can be part of this Fediverse. So there are lots of clients. I mean, PixelFed is an Instagram that is based on ActivityPub. Mastodon is just one instance of some, again, writing some software that happens to hook into the Fediverse, but it's not the only way by any means. Pleroma is another one. What are you looking at?
There's one called Calckey, Calckey, and they have been upgrading it over the last couple months, and they had just released an upgraded version a couple weeks ago, and they're working on what is effectively sort of a pro level version of it as well, with a bunch of other features, and I'm sort of holding out for something along those lines.
It's a fork of Misskey.
Yes. So Misskey is another ActivityPub compatible server, which has some nice features and a very sort of clean UI. And it's adding in a bunch of other, I think, really useful features that Mastodon is missing. But I'm sort of holding out.
Now I need to look at this. Yeah. I will look at this. We run Mastodon only because 3 years ago in 2019, I had always had something to do with StatusNet, Identica, GNU Social. This is all kind of all the same thing. And we used to have the Twit Army, Identica and stuff. So I was interested in Mastodon, set up a Mastodon server at Twit Social using somebody called masto.host, which is hosted Mastodon. Very, very good. I think it was €5 a month. It was so little that I forgot I was even paying for it. I thought, this is free. And then I realized, oh no, I've been paying for this all the time. It's through PayPal or something. And then all of a sudden, something happened around October of last year. We went from like 12 users to I think 7,000 active users, and it suddenly cost me $350 a month. But it's well worth it. And I'm going to look at some of these other ones. This is really interesting. The problem is I'm lazy, and so I like a hosted solution, which Mastodon scratches that itch. But this looks really cool.
Yeah, there are some really nice things that they're working on too, where they've sort of recognized some of the limitations of Mastodon as it is today. And my guess is that some of the hosting companies, I don't know about Masterhost in particular, but some of there are a few different companies that will host Mastodon instances are going to start offering other Calckey and some of the other ones as well.
You gotta do Calckey, man, or Misskey or something. Of course, that's the beauty of this is you can subscribe to an account on any of these, and they can go into your Mastodon or whatever it is that you use. It's pretty interesting. In fact, it's so interesting now. Venture capital companies are starting to invest in Mastodon stuff. There's a lot of attention been paid to a new Mac app called. I forgot. Mammoth, I think it's called. That's venture funded. And that's always when I get nervous, is when I start seeing the money coming in. Because you think, well, but the good news about the Fediverse is no one can own it. So go ahead, let them invest. That's fine. Let them invest. Although, to his credit, Eugene Rochko, who's created Mastodon, has turned down a lot of investment. He says, no, we don't need that. We'll just have our Patreon and keep going.
Leo, can I
go ahead.
Can I blow your mind and tell you what I was using as an RSS reader 2 decades ago?
Yes, let's talk about it. Yes.
LiveJournal. LiveJournal let you add RSS feeds, and you could just read the whatever article you wanted alongside your friends' posts, and it was such a great feature.
And that, in a way, that was also kind of more like microblogging, because you could write short little posts. It was more like a traditional blog sometimes, right? Or link roll kind of a thing, right? So you could write you could write a Twitter style post on that.
And I mean, LiveJournal actually, the technology behind LiveJournal helped inspire Facebook. I mean, it was a very foundational company actually. Unfortunately, sold off to a Russian company. Called Soup, and I forget. I think it's been passed around now, but a shadow of its former self. But a lot of great ideas there that I think actually anticipated the Fediverse, because you could take LiveJournal. It was open source code. You could basically clone LiveJournal, set up another site. They had no problem with that.
Right. Well, remember, browsers used to do RSS feeds. You could open an RSS feed in a browser and read it. So times have changed. Chat room. I want to do AI real quickly, and then we'll do some other interesting stories. But we do want to talk about AI. This was something they covered on Tech News Weekly on Thursday. There's a science fiction magazine called Clark's World. Not named after Arthur C. Clarke. I thought it was, but in fact, Neil Clarke, its founder and editor, has written a blog post saying, I got to turn down story submissions because you guys knock it off. All of a sudden, they are submitting AI-written science fiction stories. Because, I guess he pays. His tweet, submissions are currently closed. It shouldn't be hard to guess why. Just look at the graph. This is the number of people we've had to ban by month. In prior months, it was plagiarism. Now it's machine-generated submissions, and it's gone through the roof. I'm curious how he knows it's ChatGPT. Maybe it's just it's so crappily written. But then isn't a lot of sci-fi, pulp sci-fi kind of not so well written?
I mean, I'm sympathetic to the issue of having to wade through all of that, but there is a part of me that's just like, if ChatGPT wrote a really good sci-fi
Why
story?
not?
Is that so bad?
Well,
Yeah.
I think the irony of a sci-fi play blocking sci-fi articles, like the articles are being written by the machine, and the sci-fi thing doesn't take the articles that are written by the thing that the thing.
Perfect sci-fi. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like the problem is just the level of production that it's capable of. So that.
Right.
If you're paying, the problem is if a person's typing, there's a certain amount of effort that is required for that. If you could generate a 20-page book by just continuing to push a button, you end up with, that's what these people are doing, right? They're just generating whole books, and maybe you pay for it. But if you had this kind of opened, like, I'm just going to pay as we put this all in, it really, ruins it for everyone because what'll happen is you'll say, well, we'll just start paying a penny instead of 12 cents a word or whatever for everything because it's not worth as much, or we won't pay anything. And now all the people that were writing things and doing things and this is the whole issue with ChatGPT.
Yeah. And Amazon has Kindle books where ChatGPT is listed as an author or co-author. So people are just spamming
and that's when they list
Kindle
it.
store. Yeah.
When I know people who have put books into Amazon that are not, they did all the images in Midjourney, all of the things, all the text in ChatGPT, and how would you know unless there's too many fingers?
Right.
So.
Well, that's
so without
never show hands. That's the first rule.
If you never have fingers, you can generally, or glasses, you can generally do. So they're not declaring it. They're not running press releases. They're just putting it on Amazon.
Well,
and
as Benji Edwards points out in Ars Technica, there are multiple YouTube videos. Here's a few that he found. How to make money with ChatGPT writing ebooks, $800 a day. How to use ChatGPT to make children's storybooks in 5 minutes and sell on KDP. How to make passive income with ChatGPT and Midjourney, $23,000 a month. There's got to be a gold rush going on. This is...
I don't know if you can really do that, but
it's not just this one sci-fi journal, by the way. A lot of literary journals are also complaining about the wave of submissions, and so you have these automated processes against.
Right. I gotta tell you though, sometimes ChatGPT does a better. I mean, it does a better job. It does a better job than I do. Like one of the reasons I have ChatGPT, I subscribe to that as well as Twitter.
As well as Midjourney, right? You spend a lot of money on Midjourney.
To all these things.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like $48 a month. So anyway, but the thing
Club
about
Twit
ChatGPT
would only cost you $7 a month. I just you could do us and the Detector Patreon for
I'm
less.
in Club Twit, but I think I get. I think
you get it for free. We give it to you.
I get it for free. Yeah. I'd pay for it otherwise. But the thing is that with ChatGPT, what I really find interesting is I love asking it to write a description of something I already know, and I'll go write this, and it will write this super concise, really well written thing. And there's 3 or 4 things that are wrong, and I go in and I go fix those things. But it's actually a better description than what I would have done. The English structure is actually that ChatGPT does. The shrunken white pass, so to speak, is much better in ChatGPT than most people who write.
Oh yeah.
And so so that it does what I would call a shrunken white pass. Active verbs. So that's what makes it sound authoritative. Is that it's using proper English as opposed to research English. Research English is lots of passive verbs, lots of run-on sentences, lots of other things. And so it actually reads better than a lot of those things. And again, it's wrong almost every time somewhere. Like it's never like, oh, that's the right answer.
Well, it's not optimized for factualness, right?
No, but it doesn't make it not useful. I know people who are programming that use it all day. Like they go, write this, write me an app that does this.
GitHub's Copilot is based on ChatGPT and is quite effective.
And the ChatGPT went down. I know there was a division at some big company that just stopped because they've gotten so
sad.
It's such a linchpin. Well, it's just that they're 10 times more effective.
No,
with it
coders have always pasted code. This is
and this is just way better than pasting code because you don't have to figure out how this cut and paste fits in with this cut and paste. You just go, and it's able to write. The interesting thing is it's able to write native code. So you're not writing monkey code, native, React Native and React and all those monkey code things that is why everything's so unstable. And so anyway, but ChatGPT can just write what you were going to write, but natively. And then you need an expert though to fix it. That's the big thing is that, and with stories.
That's where CNET kind of got in a little trouble because even though they had an editor checking all the articles they were writing for personal finance with an AI, still mistakes slipped through, and people were a little unhappy, frankly.
I don't know how carefully CNET was checking these articles because I mean, there was one about the annual percentage yield on a savings account that just
didn't pass a sanity check.
Caught that.
Yeah. We had Connie Guglielmo on when that story broke, editor-in-chief at CNET, and she said, "Well, these are stories nobody wants to write. These are the dumb stories that you'd have an intern write. You have an editor check them, and it makes sense for a machine to write it because it's kind of rote anyway." I don't have a problem with them using a machine to insert stock prices in articles. That's fine. That's been going on for years. You probably could write most finance stories and sports stories kind of in an automated fashion. But
I remember a journalist friend of mine tweeting some years ago about a story she was getting ready to write and how she needed a drink to write it. And it was like,
exactly.
Yeah, imagine how your readers feel when they read that story. Like, it's like if we think so little of these stories,
why are we doing them?
Actually,
I'll tell you why, because it's good link bait for search engines. That's why. It gets search results, and then we get affiliate links. I know. I was told
which are not going to exist if the chatbot AI model takes off. Like you're not going to click through to anything anymore. So
you won't have to.
They're almost digging their own grave.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. You know what? We should start having our copy written by ChatGPT. I want to. We have humans write our ads, but I think there's no reason for that.
I think that you're going to end up, like we were talking about some of the places a lot of this is going to go, and you're going to see, like for instance, I think when you think speech to text and a lot of those other things, I think you're going to end up with, like for instance, all the city council meetings or whatever will just get converted to text.
Right.
Will then be summarized by ChatGPT and then put back into text to speech, and so you can just listen to the summary of any one of these anytime you want.
Well, and who needs a local?
That's not even technology to be hard.
A local reporter. Nobody likes doing that on the newspaper. Do the city council meeting, so you just have ChatGPT do it.
Well, again, I think that what we have to do, especially as Americans, is always stay ahead of it. You have to thinking that you're going to be able to take a college, get a degree and it's all going to work out, that's fading away pretty quickly.
That went away 20 years ago, dude.
Yeah. So I've never had one, so I don't know. So
yeah,
I don't,
me neither.
Everybody
I went to school with in the 70s was pre-med or pre-law. I hope they're enjoying their law careers 40 years in.
I don't have a high school degree.
I majored in Chinese.
So I don't know,
you didn't finish high school?
It's complicated. I made a strong calculation on how many credits I needed, and then took study halls, 11 study halls in my last term. I was like, I'm not going to do any more work than I have to.
I'm just going to sit there.
And what's funny is I didn't just sit there. I tried to set all the physics records. The reason I did it was so that I had plenty of time. I was like, I'm going to set all of them. I didn't set all of them. I set one. Anyway,
and did you get a job after this, or what did you do? Were you thinking about a job?
Not really. I got out of high school and I started working in an electronics company building mainframes because I had a skill that when you're 18 and then you can solder, you become really interesting.
You're golden. That's all you need.
When you learn to solder when you're 10, you're able to wield and then I started building mainframes, and then I then went back to college. I was able to go to college because I went to community college, so I had college transcripts, and so I just transferred from the community college to Penn State.
You gamed it. That's all. You gamed it. Yeah. I kind of feel bad. I sent my son to a fancy private school in high school, and a fancy college, CU, where he took a degree in broadcast journalism, and now he's making Cubano sandwiches with Guy Fieri. So I don't know.
My wife has a master's from Harvard, and so she evens that out. And the only way we were able to get an apartment in San Francisco is because of her. They look at me
to have it. Okay. Yeah, it's the same way we bought a house. Lisa had good credit. She's buying the house, not me. Let me take a little break here with a wonderful panel. I hate to keep you on the hook for a couple more ads. This one is not written by AI. It's stamps.com, and I can talk blue streak about stamps.com. We've been doing it since 2012. I've been doing ads for stamps.com, and we've been using stamps.com It is the way, if you've got a small business, if you're doing mailing of any kind, especially if you've got an eBay or an Etsy business or anywhere where you're doing mailing, you need Stamps.com for all your mailing and shipping. It lets you print your own postage and shipping labels. You don't need fancy equipment. You don't need a postage meter. You just need your computer and an internet connection and a printer, and you're done. We've been using Stamps.com since 2012. I've been telling you about Stamps.com since 2012. And if you still haven't used them yet, why are you waiting? Did you know the postage rates just increased again? I don't have to worry about it at all. I just have Stamps.com print me some stamps. They have the best discounts in the industry, too. They save you with rates you literally can't find anywhere else. Up to 84% off United States Postal Service. Oh, UPS. The guys in the brown shorts, you get discounts there, too. I mean, really, it's a one-stop shop for all your mailing needs. And Stamps.com will automatically tell you the cheapest and fastest shipping options, so you could choose the best way to ship that document or book or whatever. For 25 years, Stamps.com has been indispensable for over 1 million businesses. You get the Postal Service and UPS, everything you need to run your business right from your desk anytime, day or night. No lines, no traffic, no waiting, no parking. It's the best way to sell online because it connects with all of the major marketplaces. You don't even have to type anything in. Stamps.com, whether it's an envelope, a package, printing a label, it knows your address. It'll put your company logo on there. It'll take the address of the recipient from the website. It'll even fill out customs forms or a certified mail, whatever kind of forms you need to fill out, automatically print it out. Then you press a button, and the carrier comes to you, UPS or the Postal Service. They come to you, they pick up the package, you're done. It's the best. The silliest thing in the world, and I still get this. I order from Etsy frequently, and we'll get these packages wrapped with a bunch of twine and tape and 15 stamps manually licked and placed, and it just does not give off the impression of professionalism. A beautiful package from Stamps.com with your logo on it and the barcode for the postage, exactly the right postage. How many times all the time I get from Etsy especially, I'll get postage due packages. It's like, dude, get Stamps.com. They'll even send you a free scale, a USB scale, so you always have the right postage. I think Stamps.com is the single best way to level up your business. Do it right now. Set up your business for success. Get started with Stamps.com today. Promo code TWIT. You just click the microphone in the upper right-hand corner, put in TWIT. You'll get a 4-week trial. You'll get that digital scale for free. You'll get free postage. No long-term commitments, no contracts. Stamps.com. Click the microphone at the top of the page. Don't forget to use the code TWIT, though, because that's how they know you heard it here. Stamps.com. We love them. Thank you, Stamps, for all your support. We appreciate it. Hayes Valley, huh? I'm going to move to Hayes Valley. The Herb Cain of the internet, Owen Thomas, has a new article in the San Francisco Examiner. Apparently, the Hayes Valley in San Francisco is now the place. I know downtown, you tell me, because I haven't been downtown in a while. Downtown, I'm told, is a little bit of a ghost town.
I think that's overstated. Like south of Market, definitely. Like especially central south of Market, and
which used to be the up and coming area, right?
Oh yeah, and that's where like you wanted to be if you had a startup.
Yeah,
you wanted to be walking distance
South Park
to exactly. Like go.
That's where Twitter was born,
go
on the swings on South Park.
Exactly. South Park. Yeah, and it's where actually a lot of VCs set up offices as they kind of migrated north from Sandhill Road. But you don't want to go to you don't want to go to Soma anymore if you're trying to like run into a VC. It's definitely seems to be Hayes Valley where the action has centered. And this is it's a fun neighborhood. It's relatively new in the city. There used to be a freeway there, and they tore it down.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So you had a lot of urban renewal there. So you've got like newer businesses, and a nice vibe. It's relatively convenient, pretty central. So, there's lots of reasons why it makes sense.
This was
houses.
the most terrifying area in town because the Embarcadero Freeway loomed above you and made shade everywhere, no matter what the day was like. It was like a cavern. It was the worst. Plus, there are trucks and cars going over your head. And nothing good happened there. Then the earthquake hit in 1989. The freeway's damaged, and they had the good sense to tear it down, and it opened up all this area.
Yeah, this was in this case it was a central freeway, but it was the same thing. Same reason why.
Yep.
Yeah, same reason why the freeways came down. Why Hayes Valley? It seems to be something where there just is some consensus that like people want to get together in person. Why not pick this neighborhood? And people are migrating there, settling there.
For Soma a little bit, I think, right? It's now the place to be. I remember I used to take that Fell Street exit because I lived up in the Haight-Ashbury. And when they tore it down, I was like, well, how do I get home? I can't. That was my off-ramp. Gone forever. So you start off, I spotted my target. He was wearing a light gray North Face puffer jacket wrapped around a CrossFit taut torso with a conspicuously large wristwatch peeking out, engaged in rapt conversation with a younger man across a small table at La Boulangerie on Hayes. Here it was, a venture capitalist in search of the next big thing.
It seems to be the place, and one thing is that you can actually sit down there. Like Blue Bottle, which is very famous in Hayes Valley, got it started as a kiosk there. It's still just a kiosk. Like you can't. There's nowhere to really sit there. Same thing with Ritual. Like you can get coffee there, but then you have to take it outside in Patricia's Green. So there's just lines of little tables, perfect for having like a one-on-one conversation between a founder and a.
I remember Kevin Rose
venture capitalist
saying, I think he was a Blue Bottle guy. There was a rivalry between Ritual and Blue Bottle.
Actually, I remember the Blue Bottle at Fifth and Mission when I worked at the Chronicle, which is across the street there. That got a lot of like startup founder conversations.
And that one was great because it was hidden. Like it's right behind that old building. It's kind of like this little alleyway that is if you didn't know it was there, you wouldn't know it was there, kind of thing.
Tucked away, yeah, absolutely. When I worked in the financial district, actually, there was a Blue Bottle that went from closed, during the pandemic, like many places, to open, and like we could always just like waltz in there and get a coffee in like 30 seconds, to like packed with meetings. So I think San Francisco generally is back to an extent people really don't credit.
Good.
The interesting thing is like it's not the same old scene that there was at, say, the Creamery, which is closed down in Soma. It's a new scene that people are building around a new technology.
You call it Cerebral Valley because there's a lot of AI going on.
I can't take credit for that. I talked to Amber Yang, who's a venture capitalist who kind of popularized that term. She said she got it from a friend of hers, Bohan Liu, who just made it an offhand remark, and people have gravitated to it. I joke that a lot of times these things are like trying to make fetch happen, but in this case, fetch seems to be happening. Unlike Mean Girls.
What's fetch?
Oh, have you watched Mean Girls? There's a scene where there's this one. Oh, come on, Leo, you've got to watch Mean Girls.
Oh, I'm so bad. Okay.
There's a musical actually. You should come down to San Francisco and see Mean Girls the musical.
Okay. And they're singing. Yeah. Mean Girls is singing.
So it's a famous movie written by Tina Fey about like the culture of high school girls, and there's this one girl who just keeps saying things are so fetch. Oh my god, like
short
so
for
fetch.
Fetching.
Yeah, and well, not really clear. And finally, this other girl, the leader of the Mean Girls pack, snaps at her and says, "Gretchen, stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen."
I always wondered. There's somebody trying to make it happen. Which is
now a meme.
Is it? Is it?
Yeah, you can, if you do a meme search for "stop trying to make fetch happen," you'll find it.
Yeah. So I think it's like my instinctive reaction was, okay, come on, Hayes Valley, stop trying to make AI happen. But like there's going to be a 200-person summit held at the end of March. There's a Data plus AI summit actually happening in Moscone Center later this summer, there seems to be like this summer of AI, movement happening. And part of it is just like San Francisco is a really friendly place if you are a nerdy geek who likes to talk about, generative prompt engineering for hours at a time, or like obscure mathematical models. If you're a really good time at a party, San Francisco is the place for you.
This is good. I'm looking at all these. I went to knowyourmeme.com, all the fetch happened memes. Google, stop trying to make plus happen. It's not going to happen. Stop trying to make Internet Explorer happen. It's not going to happen. It didn't happen. In fact, they killed it. Stop trying to make Bing my default browser. It's not going to happen. Wow. This is good. This is good. I like it.
And that's Regina George. Regina George is the ultimate mean girl.
Stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen, a little doggy.
That's my dog. My dog does not fetch.
No fetching. Not going to happen. That's cute. Let's talk about Spotify. I have to say, a little schadenfreude on your article.
I was going to
Mike,
say that. I was like,
Mike Masnick,
Leo's going to enjoy this one.
Schadenfreude on this one. Spotify's podcast colonization flops. What happened, Mike?
Well, I mean, Spotify really tried to take over the podcast market and lock it up behind, not necessarily behind its paywall, because they were offering podcasts for free.
But Rogan was exclusive behind the paywall, or no? Didn't have to be, because as long as it was exclusive, they could sell ads. In fact, Rogan's ads, I'm told, were $1 million. So they could make enough money on Rogan just on the free stuff.
Yeah, I think all the podcast stuff was available for free, but in my mind, they weren't podcasts anymore. The whole idea of podcasts is that they were open, they were MP3 and RSS, and you could listen to them on whatever player you wanted. And what Spotify was doing was putting them exclusive. So there were a whole bunch that they, paid off. Big name podcasters. Obviously, Joe Rogan was the biggest, but a bunch of others as well. And they bought a bunch of podcast studios, including Gimlet, famously, and then also, what was it?
The Ringer. They bought the Ringer. They spent a lot of money on that one. I was so jealous.
Yeah, $250 million on it. And so... but the idea was then that you could only listen to those on Spotify. And that they also did that with the Obamas. The Obamas had a deal with Spotify where you could only listen to the different podcasts that they were doing through Spotify. And I kept arguing, stop calling those podcasts. It's a proprietary audio format. It is not a podcast anymore. And they were really just trying, and the economics of why they were trying to do it was pretty clear, because they have to pay for music, and music, every time it's played, they have to pay more for it. Whereas a podcast, they could pay up front and then not have to pay for every play. And so the economics were there, but I was very concerned that was sort of killing off the great open nature of the podcast ecosystem, built on open protocols that anyone could, mix and match and find the player that you wanted and do all of these things. And so I was particularly concerned about Spotify because they were big and powerful and had lots of money. There were a couple other players who were sort of trying to come into the space and do the same sort of thing.
iHeart, my former employer, Amazon with Audible.
Yes.
I'll tell you what, I had to stop using, what was it? I think it was Amazon Music, because half the time instead of music, it was podcasts. And it's like, no, I'm listening to music, Amazon Music, but they kept saying, but you got to listen to this ad-free podcast. And by the way, can I say there's collateral damage? Because not only did Spotify buy those podcast companies, and good for them,
sure.
Call Her Daddy got $60 million for her podcast. Good for her. I'm glad. They wouldn't give us any money, but that's okay. That's fine. I'm not jealous about that. But what was bad was they bought the two companies that we use for analytics that our advertisers told us we have to use, Chartable and Podsites. They bought both of them. And they they turned off Chartable. So we couldn't use Chartable anymore. We could still use Podsites, but I think it's just a matter of time before they turn that off. And there's only one reason why they would do this, and this is the only reason that Podsites is still, I think, open, is to kill the ad market for everybody else. Because advertisers want these analytics. They can go to Spotify. Spotify knows, because you're using the app, exactly when you listened, how much you listened, which ads you heard, how many people. They know your name, address, phone number, credit card. They know everything. And an advertiser, they eat that stuff up. So the only way we could compete was with these little, and we did it in a very private, focused way with pod size. We still do, where the sponsor will put a pixel on their site, and we will send pod sites our download IP addresses. They hold them. They don't give them to the advertiser. The advertiser sends the IP addresses that their tracking pixel shows. Podsites matches them and says to the advertiser, 43% of the people who heard your ad ended up on your website. Those metrics, at least, it's the minimum that, frankly, these days we can offer an advertiser and hope to get an ad by. But now that Spotify owns it, I don't know how much longer that's going to go. It's we were using Chartable, and they pulled the plug abruptly, by the way. It cost us some deals. So I think they're really gunning for open podcasting.
Yeah, well, they were, but it sounds like they're sort of recognizing.
Whoops. It didn't work out so good. Daniel Egg said, in hindsight, I got a little carried away and overinvested. $500 million, I think, right?
More than that. And then, and I believe that a bunch of sort of top executives that were running the podcasting part of Spotify have all been rushing to the doors, sort of seeing where it's going. So, it's not dead. The
Obamas moved to Audible, right?
The Obamas moved. That was pretty early on where they moved, and there were some issues there. And it feels like whatever was left of Gimlet is basically disintegrated.
Yeah.
And a couple of the people that they had that were sort of leading the charge for podcasts are basically gone. And then in the earnings call, Daniel was basically saying like, yeah, maybe we made some mistakes. Maybe we'll sort of, pull back on the podcasting space. And so,
as you said, though, they didn't have much choice because they were getting squeezed by the record labels. That business was at any moment, the labels could pull the plug on that.
Yeah, and so like all of the incentives for everybody, right? The people who sold out, certainly it made sense, but the end result was sort of bad for the public.
The people listeners who didn't sell out, like us, not so good. I directly attribute that. There are other causes as well, but the podcast advertising has fallen off a cliff. NPR said they've lost $300 million in advertising. They're laying off 10%
and I think
of their staff.
They were saying that the podcasting space itself, that advertising, actually the total amount of advertising in podcasts went down, and fewer podcasts launched in 2022 than in 2021.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things I think that I was talking to someone about this that deals with advertising, and they said one of the behaviors that they were kind of tracking and not sure if it was really making a difference or not was the fact that obviously in COVID, a lot less people were driving. So of course that took a huge hit because they just didn't have the same of the time that they used for it wasn't there anymore. And that the fact that a lot of them haven't, the thing that they're looking at right now is a lot of them haven't gone back to the office, so they're still not driving.
Yeah, but I can tell you from our own information is that the numbers have come back dramatically since COVID.
So they're right, and so but overall, that's the calculation they were looking at. They came back, but did they come back to where they were pre-COVID?
Yeah, I guess the question. Ours did. Yeah,
they have.
Yeah,
that's great.
But and I don't think that that's unusual, because what's happened also in the last few years, according to Edison, is the number of Americans. And I guess it's true globally, but they have Americans' numbers who listen to podcasts has increased dramatically. So the awareness of podcasting, and that's maybe something Spotify did do as a favor.
And I also wonder how much all the audio, books on audio, and now news
there's
on
other
audio.
content.
So
there's so much.
So I listen to. I mean, I'm listening to content all the time. Like I don't really read content. I listen to content, but I noticed that cuts into everything else. If I'm listening to Foreign Affairs or The Economist or whatever, the news over air audio or whatever, I'm listening to all of those things. And then I do then listen to some podcasts, and then I read books or listen to books. And so I think people are, the behaviors there, I think the problem really is that it's just getting spread out to almost everything.
I do have another theory, which is that, as connected TV grows in usage, and that's everything from Disney Plus to Netflix with ads, to the new fast channels, Pluto, Tubi, all of those. there's just a lot more options for advertisers, and it's video. It's more attractive, arguably, than audio only ads. And I feel like podcasts are just getting squeezed.
We're definitely getting squeezed. I don't know why, but yeah, I mean, YouTubers are getting a lot of those views too, right? I think there's always the flavor of the month. And we were only the flavor of the month for about 3 seconds.
So if I recall Alphabet's latest earnings, YouTube's growth was kind of
it was flat or down.
Yeah, it was flat, and that's because there's a lot more competition for basically targetable, addressable online video ad inventory.
Isn't streaming suffering though? I mean, it seems like a lot of media is suffering, maybe because of a glut of content.
Well, I think the issue with streaming is more that companies were like massively overinvesting, and that's kind of like what Spotify did with podcasts. And they were overinvesting because they thought Wall Street wanted growth over profitability, really, subscriber count over anything else. Like Wall Street wanted to know that you were spending a ton on content and that your subscribers were growing. And they didn't really care about anything else. And then suddenly, Wall Street started caring about profitability again. So
it was a land grab, right? It was try and get in everybody with the idea that later on down the road you'll be able to own the market
someday. Well, and I think that the other thing is that you did have to get in because there was a certain level of saturation. I know that I still haven't subscribed to Paramount because I got to a point where I was like, I can't subscribe to any more of these. Like I have Netflix and Apple and Amazon and HBO and Disney. And I was like, okay, I've got so much content right now along with YouTube and YouTube TV that I'm done. And so anything that came after that, that's why I think they had to rush in, is because anything that came after that, there's a whole lot of people that, don't want to buy anymore. And
YouTube's getting into podcasting, right? They've been slowly building their podcast tools. They now have a create button that lets you actually use YouTube to create a podcast, post it. I don't know if they have to be video.
Which is, what's weird about that is like so many podcasts, present company included, like post on YouTube and distribute as an audio podcast.
Already do. I mean, a bunch of the podcasts that I listen to, I know are also YouTube videos. So I wasn't entirely clear on what YouTube is doing.
It's just easier to do it. I think that's all.
It's just recognizing the behavior.
So
and
in our case, we create it outside of YouTube and then we put it on YouTube. They want you to create it. They want it to be exclusive ultimately, right?
But the question, and again, like this was not clear to me from that story, is it going to actually be a podcast or is it going to be proprietary to YouTube again?
It's not a real podcast. So it's like Spotify. It's another.
You can upload it.
If you create a podcast through this YouTube thing, can people listen to it outside of the YouTube ecosystem, or are they forced to?
Well, it's probably not an RSS feed, right?
They're not forcing you to be. You could download it and then put it out. But I don't think that you wouldn't be able to. It's not going to be an RSS feed. But what it would do
that's what makes it a podcast, right? Yeah. But look at the push. Here's if you go to youtube.com/podcasts. I mean, this is a big push for YouTube. They want to own all content. Right?
Obviously regular people who are watching content that they are listening to every week or every month or whatever is compelling for anybody that sells media. And so I think that definitely makes sense. I think the problem is when you make all this stuff easy, and YouTube's been doing this for a long time. Like you hit go live and now you can go live. The problem really is that most people don't know how to do that very well. And I think one of the problems with podcasts, and this isn't a problem here because Twit pays a lot of attention to quality and everything else, but a lot of podcasts to me are unlistenable on a variety of levels, both in the content, the organization of that content, and the quality of the audio. And so most people don't do most of the things. Making it easier to hit the button doesn't make it.
That hurts us too, because people make judgments about podcasts based on what they've heard. All the celebrity podcasts that for a while were going to transform podcasting. The celebrities got bored or got a movie deal, and those went. So it's all hurt us because here we've been for 19 or whatever it is years since 2015, 18 years doing this. And we haven't changed at all, by the way. Maybe that's our mistake. We haven't changed at all. but people have made judgments about, and I think our effectiveness for advertisers hasn't changed, and our audience size has gone up, but that doesn't really help.
Just wait until ChatGPT starts creating podcasts.
Great. Oh, great. Actually, one of our listeners in our IRC has submitted a ChatGPT written ad for Stamps.com that's quite good, actually. Sound of a busy office with printers whirring and phones ringing in the background. Are you tired of waiting in long lines at the post office just to buy stamps? This is exactly, it's. I feel bad for our. We have a person who writes copy. Yeah. Now all they have to do is make up a podcast, do some voicing, and profit.
There is generative AI voicing.
Oh, I know.
So you can use that too.
I'm in trouble. Well, I did not have a ChatGPT write this next ad. We're going to quickly mention our sponsor and then wrap things up. We have a few more big stories, but I do want to talk about ACI Learning. You've probably throughout the show seen the banner for ACI Learning and saying, well, what is this ACI Learning? Well, thank you, ACI Learning, first of all, for buying studio sponsorship, because that makes a big difference to us. But you probably already know them as IT Pro. IT Pro has merged with ACI Learning to create a new and I think fantastic set of tools for you to get into IT. That's what it's all about. Either get that first job or get a better job in IT with IT Pro and ACI Learning. ACI Learning has expanded their production capabilities, bringing you the content you want, and now, thanks to ACI Learning, the style you want. On demand, live streaming, or in person with the ACI Learning hubs. So if, for instance, you want to learn a lot of content through on-demand videos, you can do that, and then periodically maybe go for a few days to an ACI hub and get some hands-on and experience with an instructor. You can do that, and that's what's great, the flexibility of the power of ACI Learning and IT Pro together. IT Pro has been such a success. They joined us very early on. They had just started. Tim and Don were fans. There's Don Pizzette scrolling by on the screen. He's still putting all these great videos together. And over the 10 years they've been with us, they've built a 227,000 strong community of IT Pro learners, 6,800 hours of content, always fresh because they're always adding new content. They also get all sorts of training. Look at their podcasts. By the way, really good. Don does Technado. And now, because there's Audit Pro as well, the Skeptical Auditor podcast, another great way, if you want to listen to a podcast, to get some sense of the business. The great thing about IT is it's growing. There are more jobs now open than ever before, unfilled in many cases, especially in cybersecurity. So it really is a great time to get into IT. You can get team training for your team, too, from IT Pro. If you've got an IT team, a security team, an audit team, to keep them up to date on the latest information, get their upskilled, even get new certs and new skills, which is they'll love, and you'll love the benefits for you. You can get team training for CompTIA, Microsoft IT, Cisco, Linux, Apple, security, cloud, and on and on. We talk a lot about the CompTIA certs. The entry-level cert for IT is the A+ cert. CompTIA courses from IT Pro and ACI Learning make it easy to level up your employees who are interested in cybersecurity as well. The cybersecurity certs include CISSP, AWS, ISACA, CCNA, technical support specialist, computer user support specialist, information security analyst, and a whole lot more. They have live chat rooms if you're watching live, just like we do. They also have full transcripts of everything, so you can read along. A lot of people find it easier to read than listen. Sometimes people like to do both. That's the beauty of this. With ACI Learning now, you have basically any kind of way you like to learn, they've got that for you. Certifications are so important, not just because they certify that you have that knowledge, that skill set, but it also shows your potential employer or your boss or your customers that you're committed to keeping up to date. Your organization is committed to keeping those skills up to date so your stuff is secure and safe, right? Everybody wants that nowadays. ACI Learning can help you with fully customizable training for your team. Their dashboard's great, tracks your team's metrics like logins, viewing time, tracks completed monthly usage reports. You get visual reports you can show to the boss or the stakeholders so they know they're getting an ROI for their investment. Your teams love it too. It's engaging, entertaining, and very informative. So they think it's a real benefit to them. It's a wonderful benefit to provide. And you get the benefit of their skills and their knowledge, which is fantastic. Respected companies and government agencies around the globe turn to IT Pro and ACI Learning year after year to help them maintain their competitive edge. Supporting organizations across audit, IT, cybersecurity readiness, ACI Learning keeps you and your team at the top of your game. So for entry-level training or for putting people on the moon, ACI Learning has it covered. Maintain your company's competitive edge with ACI Learning. Here's the website, go.acilearning.com/twit. If you want to start today with a standard or premium individual IT Pro membership, use the offer code TWIT30, TWIT30. You'll get 30% off. Visit go.acilearning.com/twit. Go.acilearning.com/twit. A great company, great partnership. We're really happy to be with ACI and IT Pro. We have been over the years, and I think you're going to find some real value there. So check it out. Go.acilearning.com/twit. Don't forget that /twit. That's really important. Go.acilearning.com/twit. Victor prepared a lovely short video for us about all the fun and games we had this week on Twit. Watch. I put Windows on my MacBook. Ooh, how exciting. It's now official. You can use Windows on ARM in parallels, at least right now. But it runs I was surprised how snappy it was. I was able to play solitaire just, like that. It was great. No problem.
Free cell, let's not lose our minds with free cell, but solitaire.
Previously on Twit. This Week in Google.
Attorney Kathy Gellis was actually in the courtroom yesterday during oral arguments. The Supreme Court case, Google versus Gonzalez. The future of the internet hangs in the balance.
We were expecting a very hostile audience that was holding on to a lot of the myths. About 2:30, we ended up getting a bench that was surprisingly informed and seemed to get it and seemed to understand what was at stake.
Tech News Weekly.
Mark Gurman from Bloomberg talks all about Apple's progress, the progress that they're making with glucose tracking with the Apple Watch.
It uses a technology called optical spectroscopy, as well as a new chip technology called silicon photonics. It's using lights and lasers that shoot light into what is known as interstitial fluid, right? And it's able to then reflect back to sensors beneath the watch. And what's reflecting is the concentration of glucose within that fluid.
All about Android.
Our good friends at Huawei actually are working on a new wearable.
Huawei working on a wearable?
Huawei working on a wearable. They're called Watch Buds, and it's a smartwatch with earbuds that dock inside the watch itself.
If you missed Twit this week, you missed a lot.
Yeah. Some really interesting. This has been a good week for tech news. A lot of interesting stuff happening, and we covered it all on Twit. A few more stories before we wrap things up with our wonderful panel. Mike Masnick is here from techdirt.com. He's on Mastodon Social. M. Masnick, yay, Masnick. You could follow him with his RSS feed. What is it? What do you do? /RSS? Something like that. After the end of
I forget.
But you could Google it. You could, or Bing it. Ask ChatGPT. It'll know. Also with us, Owen Thomas. Great to see the Herb Cain of Silicon Valley, columnist at the San Francisco Examiner. So nice to see you from your house instead of the boring old protocol offices. I like it.
It was a nice perch downtown, but
yeah,
back in North Beach.
Yeah. Are you North Beach? I love North Beach. Used to live there. Do you ever go to Mario's Bohemian Cigar Store for a focaccia sandwich and a latte?
That's on the other side of Washington Square. It's kind of.
You don't go across Washington Square. Come on.
I'm kind of a Freddy's sandwiches kind of guy.
Oh, okay. But you're on the side of the good focaccia over there. That's the best focaccia, right next to the church. There's a
Liguria Bakery.
Liguria.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But you have to They start baking at 5 in the morning and they're sold out by 11.
There's a long line out the door, and if you don't get there before noon, forget it. And then they wrap it in brown paper with twine. I bet they still do. It's
the
best. Oh.
The guy just trolls it and like it's suddenly wrapped.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's so cool. Oh, I'm jealous. I loved living in North Beach. It's the Italian, old Italian district of San Francisco. And from beautiful downtown Marin, it's Alex Lindsay, officehours.global.
We're in downtown Marin. I guess there's Marin City.
There is no downtown Marin. I make a joke.
Exactly.
It's like South Detroit. There's no such thing.
Exactly.
It's just it's a concept, not a geographic location. This was an old story. You may remember a few years ago. Remember that Twitter hack where the kid got on and asked for Bitcoin, said, if you send me Bitcoin, I'll double it. I'll send it back doubled. He hacked Joe Biden's account and Barack Obama's account and lots of famous people. Probably didn't make a lot of money. Kim Kardashian, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Benjamin Netanyahu, Jeff Bezos, Michael Bloomberg, and Kanye West. And you knew it was fake because Kanye isn't talking about Bitcoin. Anyway, he got caught. Just a kid. He's 20 years old at the time. He is now being held in Spain, but a Spanish court he's British. I don't know what he's doing in Spain, but a Spanish court has said, yep, he can be remanded to the U.S., extradited for trial there. So they got him. I like to do stories where they get these guys because
the long arm of the cyber.
It's slow, but it eventually, yeah. I doubt it was a dumb hack. I doubt he made any money on it. But anyway,
I don't care whether he makes money or not. I just think that you have to. I mean, like if you're out there causing mischief, it should be adjudicated.
So encryption did not protect him.
No,
whatever it was,
whatever
he was doing didn't work.
Yeah.
You know what happens, and I've talked to many people in the law enforcement, the Secret Service. A lot of these guys boast. They go into chat rooms. They go, "Hey, I did that." Because if you do that and you don't boast, does anybody know? Who you are? No.
But why do it if you can't boast? Why do it?
Right.
Why do it if you can't tell your friends?
That's the whole point.
I did the thing. Yeah, exactly.
So they always incriminate themselves in the long run. Maybe not the ransomware gangs. Apple has reputedly secured every single 3-nanometer chip that TSMC can make for the iPhone 15 and perhaps the M3 chip in upcoming MacBooks later this year or early next year. Now, that might sound like good news. It's certainly bad news for everybody else. But I should mention that even though the yields are good on these 3-nanometer, the N3 process, they're only making about 45,000 wafers a month. So you do the math. That is not enough for all the iPhones they'll sell. It's not enough for all the iPhones they'd sell in a month. What is that? 45,000 times 12. So, it's 5 or 6 million. It's not.
It may be enough to sell for the Macs
top
or the
line.
iPads.
Yeah.
Well, the Macs or the iPads or something like that. But that's and again, that's usually where it starts. And it doesn't sound like, they may wait another year for the iPhones themselves to do this, whereas they can get it started with the larger devices.
We'll talk about this though on Mac Break, I'm sure, on Tuesday. It's good news for Apple. They can sew up that production. Bad news for everybody else. This was a little bit annoying. There is currently a lawsuit by the filmmakers who made such wonderful movies as The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, London Has Fallen, and Hellboy. These film companies were suing internet provider RCN because they're not doing enough to stop subscribers from pirating on their network. Now, RCN, which denied most of the allegations, tried to get the case dismissed. Now they're going after Redditors, people who anonymously posted on Reddit talking about piracy, not committing it, just talking about it. Some Reddit users specifically mention RCN. Others refer to ISPs in more general terms, which could be RCN. We don't know. The filmmakers want to know who these people are, so they have obtained a subpoena compelling Reddit to tell the movie makers who Ben 125125, Squatting Croat, Griffdog21, Aromatic Botanist, Chikara Fan, CompiPack, Dot Samantha, I Like Pie 96, and Matt 3324R. Wow. I can't believe the court went along with this. Reddit, of course, is going to fight it, but
I think Reddit did turn over one username.
Ben125125 got handed over.
I mean, it's all of these cases are a little bit sketchy for a variety of reasons, but what they're looking for, I believe, from what details are revealed, is that they claim that these people are saying on Reddit that RCN was not killing their account, so therefore they see it as evidence in their case. But it feels like a stretch, and you're dragging in these random people, and as soon as you receive a subpoena, that's serious, and they got to lawyer up, and that's really very aggressive.
Sigh. But you know what? The hitman's wife's bodyguards, friends, and family got to get that money. So, okay. Okay. I don't know what's going to happen with this. Earlier this week, actually it was early last week, the White House decided not to block the ITC's ban on the Apple Watch.
Yeah.
A live core, which makes, and a great product, by the way, the Cardia device, which allows you to do, a kind of a little EKG with your thumbs. They claim that Apple stole that and put it in the Apple Watch. They're suing. The ITC ruled, and even though, okay, now this is what's really weird. The Patent and Trademark Office said, yeah, that patent sucks, and they threw it out. Nevertheless, the International Trade Commission ruled that Apple infringed on this non-existent patent, and they're potentially going to block imports of Apple Watches. Yep. The White House declined to get involved.
This one is kind of crazy because of the whole Patent and Trademark Office, and there was some really interesting timing on all of this, which is that you have these dual processes, and this could get into the weeds, so I'm not going to go too deep on it, where the ITC process, and which is the International Trade Commission, and then the PTAB, the Patent and Trademark Appeals Board process, are two totally separate processes, which actually allow, and the regular court process, it allows patent holders to go through multiple routes. And the ITC was supposed to rule first on these things, but then delayed its ruling until after the Patent and Trademark Office or Patent and Trademark Appeals Board came out and said, all of these patents are invalid. We never should have granted them in the first place. The patents are terrible. Like, get rid of them. And the ITC, which, technically is its own independent organization and doesn't have to listen to that, then came out 2 weeks later and said, well, Apple violates these patents, and therefore, and the only remedy that the ITC has, they can't do fines, but they can block import.
They can say you can't bring it into the country. Yeah,
you can't bring it into the country.
Which would halt all sales. Yeah.
So Apple ran to the White House, which had protected them a decade ago.
Obama protected them. There was an iPad block, right?
Right. With Samsung, it was a very similar sort of situation. And Obama rejected the ITC's recommendation and allowed the import to continue. And so Apple, I think, was very much hoping, and I think for good reason, they had a pretty strong argument in that the PTAB had said, these patents are not valid. So the whole thing is a joke. And yet, for whatever reason, the Biden administration decided not to go against the ITC
ruling. Is there a chance in hell that the Apple Watch would be blocked?
It absolutely could be. The more likely thing is that Apple is going to cough up a huge sum of money to a live core,
or Apple will buy a live core and bury them.
right.
That's kind of the.
They have to be careful here because actually, although Apple, brought in, a whole bunch of, I think 500 testimonials saying the Apple Watch saved my life. A live core saved some lives too. A live core was a big breakthrough in AFib.
I mean, like it had a breakthrough, but the thing is that number one, the patents didn't hold up. Number two is the problem really is there's a big difference between having to buy something different to have on to measure what your situation is and having it on your watch. And I think the public value of having it on your watch is pretty high. So the idea I think that Apple's making is number one is the patent isn't. I mean, this case is nuts. Like the idea that the patent isn't valid, and the idea of blocking it when it actually is making a measurable difference in life saving at a level that's at least 100, if not 1,000 times what a live core can do, is just kooky. I mean, this is the government run awry. This is bureaucrats doing bureaucrat things, like not thinking about anything else. It's nutty.
Can you appeal?
Well,
go ahead.
I would put it on a live core too. Like they are clearly pushing this angle as hard as they can under. Presumably,
because they don't have a business model with that. With Apple going down the path it's going, a live core is dead. That's the problem. Is that like if Apple puts all the health stuff into your watch, and even if it's not, they're toast. They're toast. That's the problem.
Right. Well, maybe what you should do is buy a sealed iPhone and hold it for 20 some years or whatever, because you can make some money. That's what Karen Green did. She bought the original iPhone in 2007 and never opened it. The sealed iPhone in a box just sold for $63,356 to some cracked collector. I guess.
And that's amazing foresight, because like the iPhone. The original iPhone, the first generation iPhone, was not a big seller, and it was kind of seen as a novelty, like a kind of it was a tack on to Apple's very large, successful iPod business. I mean, it even used the 30-pin iPod connector. It was basically an iPod.
We forget that, don't we? Didn't have cut and paste, didn't have apps. And yet it was a revolution. Alex, you and I were doing Mac Break Weekly. Remember Scott Bourne wanted to make a vest. Yeah, we all went down.
Scott and I especially, we were definitely on the.
There was a picture of him in the San Francisco Chronicle as the first guy to come up to the Apple store. He was holding up his iPhone like this with that original iPhone. Scott, if you'd only put it away.
Exactly, put it in a box.
Has anyone found out why this iPhone was never opened?
No, unknown. Maybe because Karen got two. Maybe it was a corporate buy. No, we don't know.
Because that's the part that I'm wondering about. Because it was not a cheap item.
No,
for most people,
$400 or $500, $600. I can't remember.
And I have purchased gadgets and left them in the packaging.
I'm going to leave them all in the packaging from now on. Yeah.
But this I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Foresight.
And there was a great picture. There's a site for Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs' birthday would have been this week. And there's the Steve Jobs archives, which for a long time didn't really have much in there. I think it's being run by, I think Lorene put up money and some other fans, maybe Tim Cook. And they also gave a lot of their stuff that they had to the archive, stevejobsarchive.com. And now they're starting to release stuff, which is nice. The latest thing for his birthday was a picture of Steve. Let me see if I can find it. He was walking in New Orleans and noticed in an Apple store, it was a Best Buy or somewhere. They didn't have Apple stores, right? Noticed somebody playing with a Macintosh. I don't know where this is on the site. I can't find it. Maybe they just released it to the press. Let me see if I can find this picture. But he was, at the time, the Mac had just come out. There it is. He was probably not sure whether it was going to be a huge success. The Lisa had kind of been a flop. His, frankly, job was on the line, believe it or not. In fact, he did lose his job shortly after this. But there he is, staring through a window at a a young woman playing with the Macintosh for the first time in 1984. Steve Jobs, 28 years old at the time, would have been his 68th birthday on February 24th. Happy birthday, Steve. And that is the end of that. Mike, thank you so much for spending a couple of 3 hours with us. We really appreciate it. It is the best place to go to read about. I don't know how you don't have a heart attack, to be honest. Because everything it makes me mad just to read Tech Dirt. You have to write this. I mean, I'm just you how do you do it? How do you stay calm?
I do have a blood pressure monitor off to the side.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much just stupidity out there. And this is the place to read articles about stupidity, right?
Yeah, but we have a sort of weird optimism beneath all of this.
I know.
The reason we're calling it out is because we think people can be better, and we think that innovation and the internet can be better, and therefore we are angry at the things that hold that back, but we are optimistic about where we get to in the end.
I like that. You also have a podcast, which everybody should subscribe to. You can get all of this at techdirt.com. And I do really want to encourage people to support Tech Dirt. We talk about our own club all the time. But, if you only had $7 to spend it on Tech Dirt. Lisa's going to kill me. But honestly, you guys are doing God's work. Now, if you have $15, spend it on both of us, okay?
There we go.
But supporting Tech Dirt really is worthwhile because you are literally doing the most important work on the internet right now. I think it's super important. And I'm so glad. We always are thrilled when you can join us. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's always fun.
Best thing I can do for you, Owen Thomas, is keep calling you the Herb Cain of Silicon Valley. Owen, as you remember,
second most important writer on the internet.
Second most important writer on the internet. As you may remember, was at Protocol. Protocol fell apart. Now a columnist for the Examiner. And you know what? I love your stuff. I am going to start reading this. I'm going to add you to my RSS. How about that? Great kind of columns about the real world in San Francisco and stuff. I haven't read the Examiner in a long time since the newspaper wars knocked it out, but I'm glad to see it's doing it. It's doing it.
I remember in the 90s when I first got to town, I was more of an Examiner kid, and that,
me too.
Like
it was the afternoon.
A lot of people.
Yeah,
and it was also the city paper.
Right.
They still capitalize the C in city, which I love. As in, there is only San Francisco. There are no other cities.
And Owen's
when you talk about the city. Yeah, this is it.
And Owen's got the stories about San Francisco, and I think well worth reading at sfexaminer.com. I'm telling you, this is really, we need a Herb Cain in San Francisco. You could be our new Herb Cain. He was the great columnist who dominated San Francisco newspapers for decades at the Chronicle, then the Examiner, then back at the Chronicle. I think this is going to be an opportunity for you. Oh, there's other Owens. Don't look at that other Owen. Look at Owen Thomas. I should have searched for Owen and Thomas. Thank you, Owen. Really appreciate it. His website will someday be resurrected, much like that ficus behind him. Ditherati.com. That's the place to go at Owen Thomas on the Twitter. Mr. Alex Lindsay, you'll be back on Tuesday. We will talk about so much stuff. Lots of news in the Apple world. 090.media if you want to hire him for your next streaming event. But everybody should go to officehours.global because it's a great place to hang for free and learn about all sorts of stuff. Mindfulness today, which is kind of cool. Content creation strategies and processes.
This was from yesterday. Yeah,
that was yesterday.
For educators, yeah, exactly.
Okay. Sony FR7, MIDI programming, Other World Computing's Larry O'Connor. Oh, yeah, there it is. Saturday's show. Yeah. Lots of stuff on here. And it's open to all. You can look at their stuff on YouTube, but you can also join the Zoom conversation, ask questions, and so forth. Just go to officehours.global for more information. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
We do Twit every Sunday afternoon right after Ask the Tech Guys. I think it's a really good Sunday lineup now. Mike and I start in the morning with Ask the Tech Guys. Then about 2 o'clock Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2200 UTC. We gather together with the best minds in technology to talk about the week's tech news on This Week in Tech. You can watch us do it live from 2 to 5 Pacific time. That would be 5 to 8 p.m. Eastern time, 2200 UTC. The live streams at live.twit.tv. Actually, that's an aggregate of all the different live streams, so you can pick your favorite audio or video live stream. If you're watching live, chat with us live at irc.twit.tv. That's open to all. You can also chat in our Discord if you're a member of Club Twit. Again, $7 a month. It's a great deal. You get ad-free versions of all the shows. You get to participate in the Discord and all the special events that Ant puts together. Oh, you got some new events. Samable Samad coming up. Stacy's Book Club. Inside Twit with Victor. Alex Wilhelm will be doing an Ask Me Anything. And Sean Powers from Floss Weekly for a fireside chat. All coming up. Ant Pruitt is our community manager, puts together some fun stuff for members and members only. There's also members only shows like Hands on Macintosh with Micah, Paul Thurrott's Hands on Windows, the Untitled Linux Show with Jonathan Bennett, Stacy's Book Club, the Giz Fizz with Dick DiBartolo. There's lots of reasons to be in the club, but the number one reason to join the club, it really keeps us on the air, keeps the lights on, keeps the team employed, and increasingly, as podcast advertising dwindles, it's going to be the club that keeps us going. So if you can afford it, if you've already donated to Tech Dirt, you've already bought a subscription to the Examiner, then you can then the $7 left, join Club Twit. Go to twit.tv/Club Twit. Thank you very much in advance for your support. That just about does it. You can get a show also after the fact at the website, twit.tv. You can also subscribe on your favorite podcast player. There's a YouTube channel. Lots of ways to watch Twit. But please do watch it every week because we love having you here. I thank you for joining me. And as I have said for the last 15 years, I'll say it one more time, another Twit is in the can.
This is amazing.